A warm welcome to this first session of the last day of the first planetGOLD Global Forum. My name is Jérôme Stucki. I'm the Chief of the Materials and Chemicals Management Division in UNIDO, and it is my great pleasure to be moderating this session today. Can I have the first slide, please? This session will focus on controlling mercury flows to artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Following a brief introduction, we will have 3 presentations, followed by a question and answer part that will wrap up our session. Next slide, please. So the focus of this session is on mercury flow, because mercury is widely used in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector, and is the purpose of both the planetGOLD program as well as the Minamata Convention to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate mercury from the environment. You can see on this slide how mercury is being used. It's a rapid, cheap, simple, and available method to extract mercury. And on the next slide, please, you will see in red in this bar chart the quantity of mercury that is being used in the different regions of the world. So we can see that in Latin America, in Africa, or in Asia, a significant amount of mercury is being used in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector. Now, to get us further started with this session on mercury trade, we prepared 4 questions for you. I would like to invite you to use the poll function on the right-hand side of your screen to answer these questions as they come. The first question is, how much mercury used is actually acquired illegally in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector? Is it around 35%, 50%, or 65%? Please use the poll function to provide your answer. And now let's look at the answer. It's answer A. And what we can see here is that it's actually a wide range. It's between 400 and 100 tons of mercury that are estimated to be used annually in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector. And this wide range indicates that there is a lack of information. The second important information here is that the value of mercury is minimal in comparison to the value of the gold. Second slide, please, or next question, please. Which country was the top importer of mercury last year in 2021? Was it Togo, India, Bolivia, or Russia? You have again the opportunity to provide your answer in the polls on the right side of your screen. And now let's look at the answer. It's answer C, Bolivia, with a total of 140 tons mercury imports that were reported. The third question is, what percentage of mercury goes to artisanal and small-scale gold mining in sub-Saharan Africa? Is it 40%, 60%, or 80%? And here, if you paid attention to the world map, you might have already an idea of the correct answer. Let's look at this answer. Yes, answer C. It is estimated that 80% of all mercury demand in sub-Saharan Africa is being used in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector. And finally, the fourth question. How much mercury was used in the Philippines in 2016? Was it 25 tons, 75 tons, or 125 tons? This is your last opportunity to provide your answer in the poll section on the right side of your screen. And now let's look at the correct answer. It is answer B. And here again, we have a range, a relatively wide range between 30 and 100 tons of mercury that was used in the Philippines. But the interesting fact is that only 428 kilos of mercury were legally imported. So here we can see that there is a very significant illegal mercury flow towards the Philippines. And with that, we conclude the quiz. I would like to thank you for actively participating in this quiz. And now let's turn to our first presenter, Ms. Yun Insiani. She is Senior Environment Impact Pollution Controller within the Ministry of Environment and Forestry for the Republic of Indonesia. Prior to that, between 2014 and 2020, she was the Director of Hazardous Substance Management. Ms. Insiani was an active participant in the preparation of the Bali Declaration, and she will now present the main facts of the Bali Declaration. Ms. Insiani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy, for the introduction and the invitation for sharing information for today's session. Good morning, good day, and good afternoon for distinguished guests and fellow participants. One of the important achievements from COP4 Minamata Convention in Bali last month is Bali Declaration on combating illegal trade on mercury. This Bali Declaration is received attention and agreement from participating countries in the COP4. Next slide, please. I would like to start this presentation with a question: why, on what the factors that trigger Indonesia to initiate and propose the Bali Declaration? There are several factors, of course, that contribute to the underlying reasons of Bali Declaration, which are the fact that illegal trade of mercury has increased significantly, as highlighted in the 2020 UNEP report on illegal trade of mercury. As reported by the UNEP in 2020, mercury was among the chemical illegal traded in the world, with an estimated global value of more than 200 million US dollar per year and accounting. This illegal industry poses a strong challenge in our fight to free the world from mercury. ASGM, as the major contributor of illegal trade of mercury, with high concentration in the region of Southeast and East Asia, Sub-Sahara Africa, and South Africa. And the nature of illegal trade of mercury, which is, among others, cross-border, that requires collective action. There is a need to strengthen global cooperation to combat mercury illegal trade. Indonesia, as one of the affected parties, views the need to address this global problem urgently. Next slide, please. Bali Declaration is a non-binding international declaration to combat mercury's illegal trade. It is a political commitment proposed under the Indonesian presidency of COP4 Minamata Convention. The status of Bali Declaration is to support Minamata Convention. It is non-binding, non-contentious, and non-negotiated declaration, as it aims to mainstream and raise the awareness to address the issue of illegal trade of mercury. It is a follow-up of convention that calls for cooperation to make mercury history, such as in the Article 7, Paragraph 4 on the ASGM. There are three objectives of Bali Declaration, namely, the short-term objective is to mainstream the issue of illegal trade of mercury, and the midterm objective is to encourage bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperation to address the issue of illegal trade of mercury. And the long-term objective is to seek the possibility of concluding an international governance in illegal trade of mercury. With the declaration, we aim to further assist the ASGM in finding alternative means to illegally obtain mercury, force stronger international cooperation, support Minamata Convention itself, and ultimately to help environment and future generation to free from adverse impact of mercury. Next slide, please. So there are four pillars which are strongly highlighted in the Bali Declaration, which are encouraging international cooperation in enforcement and surveillance. And in this point, it's expected that donor countries, agencies, and international financial institutions to contribute to the advancement of the aims of this declaration through provision of funding, technical assistance in support of a country's national, cross-border, and sub-regional effort. And secondly, encouraging conducive and enabling policy, regulation, and other internal measures. We expect within its jurisdiction to address the illegal trade of mercury, including measures to increase transparency and enforce regulation, particularly to online platforms such as e-commerce and social media companies that host platforms facilitating illegal trade of mercury. Thirdly, promoting education, research, and studies. Through this point, it is expected that we can set up networks of education, research, and studies institutions amongst like-minded countries or countries with common interests, which main purposes are to share or exchange relevant information on the curricula of training education, research symposia publication, and fundings of studies addressing the mercury illegal trade. And finally, promoting a third-party cooperation such as donor, e-commerce, capacity buildings, and technical assistance, including technology transfer for environmentally sound management of mercury and mercury waste for developing countries. From this point, it is expected that the developing countries or countries affected from mercury illegal trade will gain sufficient or enhance their capacity in detecting, preventing, measuring, or combating illegal trade of mercury domestically, regionally, or globally. Next slide, please. To follow up, what next? To follow up the Bali Declaration, we will work in three stages, which are short-term program, mid-term, and long-term program. The short-term program, with this mainstreaming the need to combat the global trade of mercury. These activities involved in this step is within their respective territory. Every party is encouraged to mapping or baselining the data information pertaining to illegal trading on mercury, such as the origin, route, estimated volume, value of trading, and any relevant information. Eventually, the party can interchange this data with interest or cooperating countries. A massive public campaign program on the effect of illegal trade of mercury would also an effective way to invite a public participation. And for the midterm program, we'll focus on fostering concrete cooperation through having a memoranda of understanding between like-minded countries, addressing, among others, but not limited to information exchange, experience sharing, technology transfer and developing framework of cooperation and actions in detecting, preventing, and measuring or combating illegal trade of mercury. And of course, for the long-term program, we'll propose an international governance to combat illegal trade of mercury, such as establishing permanent working group involving countries affected by mercury illegal trading, or countries or institutions having common interest in combating illegal trade of mercury. We strongly suggest that Secretariat will facilitate and donor countries will technically support the working group. Upon its conclusion at the COP42, the Indonesian government stands ready to work together to achieve the mid and long-term objectives of the Bali Declaration. Next slide, please. So we are hoping through the strong commitment from parties, the trade of mercury can be stopped, as it will significantly support our global commitment to make mercury history. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Insiani, for this very informative presentation on the Bali Declaration. I would like to remind all of you that it's possible to ask questions to our presenters in the Q&A part of your screen, on the right-hand side of your screen. And now I would like to move to our next presenter, Mr. Peter Maxson. He is the director of the Brussels-based consultancy Concord East-West, and he has focused most of his efforts on mercury-related issues for more than 20 years. His current priorities include enhanced transparency in international trade of mercury, as well as research and policy measures with regard to illegal mercury trade. Mr. Maxson will give us an overview of the global trends and status of global mercury trade. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Jerome. Am I coming through okay? Okay, I'll assume that everyone can hear me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are listening from. In the time permitted, we'll provide a brief overview of global mercury trade, both formal and informal or illegal trade. And I will provide some suggestions for monitoring and control of informal mercury trade. The next slide, please. I admit this slide is a bit confusing, but overall, to better understand mercury trade, we can look quickly at the main uses of mercury, which amount to over 4,000 metric tons per year. In this diagram, we show that about 1/4 of the total is used in mercury-added products. A similar amount is used to produce vinyl chloride monomer used in PVC, mostly in China, and up to 1/3 of the total is used in the ASGM sector to produce gold. Trends since 2015 show that ASGM is the only use of mercury that continues to increase, with some estimates well over 1,000 tons per year. Next slide, please. Looking at regional ASGM activity, as Jerome noted, Sub-Saharan Africa uses about 20% of all mercury used in ASGM, while South America and East and Southeast Asia each use nearly 40%. Of the main sources of mercury, we can go to the next slide already. Mercury mining has been and remains the primary source. The biggest change here in recent years is that mercury used to come from mines in Spain, China, and Kyrgyzstan. And more recently now, it comes from artisanal mining operations like the operation shown here in Jakarta, especially in Indonesia and Mexico. The next slide, please. This is an operation in Mexico. The mercury roasting method is slightly different in Indonesia and Mexico, but the process is basically the same: to heat cinnabar, mercuric sulfide, until the mercury vaporizes, after which the mercury vapor is condensed back into liquid mercury. The next slide, please. Next, we have two diagrams of reported global mercury trade in 2005, and the next slide is in 2017. In 2005, most of the reported trade passed through Europe, as you can see here, and the largest mercury dealer was based in the UK. Next slide, please. By 2017, the US and EU mercury export bans had come into effect. Mexico and Indonesia were producing a lot of unreported mercury, and trading hubs like the United Arab Emirates, India, and Hong Kong had taken the place of previous trading hubs. Next slide, please. Especially important to our discussion here, reported global mercury trade in 2017 was less than 1/3 of the trade volume in 2005, even though global demand for mercury had not changed much during that period of time. So it is clear that since about 2013, a significant and increasing amount of mercury trade has been taking place outside the formal structure of government reporting, trade statistics, tariffs, etc. Next slide, please. To look more closely at the trade in a couple of countries, Peruvian mercury imports, shown here in red, mostly for ASGM use, were restricted after 2014, and formal imports decreased rapidly. But in neighboring Bolivia, where mercury imports in green were not restricted, they increased equally rapidly. So Peru was not using less mercury in ASGM. Rather, as long as demand for mercury in Peru remained, the mercury was finding other ways to enter the country, such as informal trade from Bolivia. Next slide, please. There is a lot of information on this slide, but basically it shows external sources, such as Mexico and Turkey, of mercury coming to Latin America, indications of mercury seizures in Guatemala and Brazil, main mercury transit points between countries, locations of actual and proposed border control stations in Brazil, etc. Looking more closely at Colombia here, we can see that mercury comes across the Colombia-Venezuela border by light aircraft from Mexico, by sea from Panama, etc. And mercury comes into Peru from Mexico by way of Panama, as well as from Bolivia and Ecuador. So you can see that once informal trade flows have been established, they can become quite complicated and quite difficult to track and to monitor. Next slide, please. The difficulty of enforcing mercury controls reflects a range of social, economic, and political challenges. Many ASGM operations are remote, informal, and sometimes dangerous. Operators and traders making the most money not only have the most power, but also have little incentive to shift away from using mercury. Gold and mercury are limited in volume and easy to hide. Many ASGM regions are not well governed, and long and remote borders are difficult to control. And communication and cooperation among national institutions, as well as some international agencies, could often be improved. Next slide, please. So just a couple of slides about the monitoring and inspection. As Ms. Inciani mentioned, the Bali Declaration points out the need for better monitoring of mercury trade, and especially identifying and eliminating routes for illegally traded mercury. I will provide a few comments here about inspections and investigations. An inspection is basically a monitoring and control exercise when there is no particular suspicion of wrongdoing. The key steps in inspection shown here include the general framework, tasks and responsibilities, risk assessment and priority setting, the operational action plan, including objectives and resources, cooperation with national and international colleagues as relevant, and evaluating and reporting the results of the inspection process. The last slide, please. Carrying out an investigation. Once there is suspicion or evidence of wrongdoing, a focused investigation may be launched. An upstream investigation consists of a number of steps before the target of the investigation is identified, such as setting objectives, identifying measures and techniques to be used, and gathering documentary evidence. A downstream investigation may involve identifying the target firms or individuals using open source intelligence, use of informants and witnesses, inspection of containers prior to export, etc. Likewise, the verification of a range of investigative documents, such as shipping documents and standard costs through the supply chain, wiretaps, and other investigative techniques may be used. So I think I've used most of my time, but there will be time later for some questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Peter, for, in a very short time, giving us an overview of the general trends on mercury trade, including the increasing informal trade, the regional smuggling issues, and the challenges with enforcement. I would like now to introduce Ms. Marcena Hunter. She is a senior analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Crime. Her work has focused on gold-related crime, other mineral resources, illicit financial flows, and development response to organized crime. Marcena will give us an overview of the situation on gold and mercury flow in West Africa. And with that, Marcena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jerome, and thank you for having us as part of what has been a very interesting and informative forum thus far. So I'll be speaking on curbing illicit mercury and gold flows in West Africa, which was part of a 2018, based on 2018 report commissioned by and supported by UNIDO. I'd just like to say I was not going to be able to be here originally, and my colleague Dominique Bali-Capocro was going to do the presentation, and I just wanted to recognize him as being really instrumental in carrying out this research and thank him, as well as Salomon Ampofo, who is with Friends of a Nation in Ghana. So they were really instrumental to carrying out this research. So the research in this report was carried out in 2018. So a lot of these findings still are relevant, but I will flag where we have built on our knowledge base or we've identified that flows have shifted. Next slide, please. So mercury and ASGM. Mercury is widely used across ASGM in West Africa. Some of the major countries where it is used are Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Within the region, mercury is traded in closed supply chains that are linked to the illicit gold trade. Often it's the gold buyers or traders who provide miners with mercury. And in this way, they're able to secure supply chains in many cases and then secure gold sales. So it can be a form of pre-financing and securing those supply chains and relationships. There has been a rise in cyanide leaching to process gold in West Africa, as well as this is a trend we're seeing globally in recent years, and it's likely to continue to spread. Why this is relevant to mercury is that we're not necessarily seeing mercury use decrease with the increase in cyanidization. Rather, tailings or what's left over from ASGM are being reprocessed using cyanide. How the process works and where mercury is used in it can really impact how toxic this makes the mercury. For example, what's happening in Indonesia, where the mercury is put into tailings earlier in the process, is different from West Africa. However, what happens is that cyanide makes mercury water soluble, making it more toxic and mobile, which leads to the bioaccumulation of methyl mercury in environmental systems, which is really increases the severe impacts of mercury. And we're also seeing that this increase in cyanidization is also influencing financial flows and gold supply chains and power dynamics in the region, which will also impact mercury flows going forward and use. So this is certainly a trend that we have seen since this report came out that is continuing, and it's one to continue to watch in relation to mercury. Next slide, please. Burkina Faso is a juggernaut within the regional mercury trade, but it is a landlocked nation. So mercury often comes to the region through ports. At the time of research, Togo was heavily referenced as an entry point, and it is likely that this continues to be the case. However, since this report did come out, we have also heard increasing reports of mercury being trafficked through Ghana into Burkina Faso, which is referenced a bit in this map, but I would say that's perhaps more of a defined flow than what is reflected here. And especially flows from the upper west of Ghana into the sudwest region of Burkina Faso is something that's not depicted in this map. We also have reports of mercury coming in from Benin into Burkina Faso. From Burkina Faso, mercury is distributed throughout the rest of the region. And this is also reflected in cyanide flows. For gold flows, Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso, in addition to Ghana, are all major export points. However, we are hearing less about Togo. And when the study was carried out in 2018, Togo, it appears, at least from trade data, was at the peak of its gold exports. And so if gold is continuing to go out through Togo, it's not being declared. And it's also a flow that we're hearing less about. We are hearing more about gold being flown out either directly from Burkina Faso, Bamako in Mali, or out of Conakry in Guinea. And so this, with mercury, the provision of mercury from Burkina Faso as a form of financing impacts on these mercury flows, and also increased insecurity in the region since 2017 is pushing Burkinabe financiers to look outside the country to make up for lost gold stocks that are being lost from decreased mining activity within the country. And so this may also fuel the spread of financing and mercury and cyanide use into neighboring countries. Next slide, please. Looking at regulatory actors and frameworks, there has been a lack of clear guidance in many facets that makes tracking and responding to the mercury trade a significant challenge. One of the first things is that environmental ministries are often charged with implementing mercury action, including the Minamata Convention, which makes sense in many ways. But when it comes to the ASGM sector, where you really need to have the mining ministries and finance ministries, which often include tax and customs bodies, these are going to be really important organizations to include within responses, and it's within their jurisdiction, whereas the environmental ministries often don't have the knowledge or enforcement powers necessary to take real action on the issue. So starting with the actors themselves, there's a real need for collaborative action in platforms across these various ministries. And in particular, cooperation and capacity building with customs bodies. A lot of our interviews with customs actors during this time, they were not aware of mercury flows or mercury laws, or didn't have the knowledge or the resources necessary to identify them and take action. And looking at the trade data and laws themselves, there's also a lot of discrepancies there, where we see that countries were using different trade codes to track mercury. And so it makes it difficult to track what mercury imports are actually being declared. In addition, there was discrepancies with the trade laws amongst countries, as well as between trade and use laws within countries. So in some cases, you would have mercury not be allowed under environmental or mining laws in a country, but the trade regulations would be really weak. And so there would be discrepancies there. So looking forward, next slide, please. So looking forward to what can be done, and I would just like to echo my fellow panelists' sentiments about what can be done around increasing and continuing to monitor mercury flows. As we can see, even past these few years, mercury flows do continue to shift, and we need to continue to build our knowledge on them if we're to identify them and track them. And also, I think some of the challenges identified and responses needed are also very relevant. Mercury is used in wide-ranging locations that can be very remote, and in West Africa, becoming increasingly insecure. So what we need to do is increase enforcement efforts at trade hubs or pinch points in the supply chain, and as well as improve engagement with and capacity of customs. There can also be efforts to harmonize mercury and gold trade codes and regulations, and even cooperation between customs bodies across the region. And lastly, we should be looking at ways that we can reward miners who don't use mercury. I realize this is a difficult challenge and difficult to track, but it's certainly something to consider where we're not only using sticks, but also carrots, and incentivizing and empowering miners to process gold using non-mercury solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcena, for this overview of the situation in West Africa, as well as the solutions that you are suggesting to tackle this challenge of informal mercury flow in the region. We have now received a few questions from the audience, and I would like to ask our expert here to answer a few of these, given the remaining time that we have. And the first one is addressed to Ms. Vinciani. Demand is what is driving the ASGM flow towards the mercury towards the ASGM. And so far, importing countries have had limited success in reducing that flow. So you think that there is some specific incentives that could be done at the exporting countries level to reduce this mercury trade flow?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think smuggling always involves both parties, the importing and exporting countries. However, the key lays in the commitment of exporting countries, as they have more bargaining position as mercury supplier. Specific approach will vary from country to country, depending on their situation and motive, mainly in terms of economy. We believe for mercury exporting country could improve the situation by end up of mercury trade flows and formalize mercury primary mining within a period of up to 15 years after the date of entry into force of the convention. And we do have field experience from planetGOLD Indonesia project side, regarding the demand of mercury from ASGM side, that the miners are aware of the government regulation stated that the mercury is banned to use, which indicated by reducing demand on mercury on side, because miners seeking alternatives system, and mostly miners avoiding to deal with law enforcement on buying the mercury. This situation implies that implementation of regulation or law enforcement as one of approaching strategy to improve the situation. In addition to by providing special regulation or exporting prohibition and distribution, especially those already prohibited by the convention, and carry out strict supervision. That's my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this detailed answer. Maybe I'm turning now to Peter. We've seen from your slides that there was a shift in the main trading hubs over the last years. Do you foresee any further changes?
This is quite difficult to say. As you know, or as I mentioned, the main shift was a bit of a surprise. We put a lot of effort into closing the large mercury mine in Spain in the early 2000s. And the hope was that by seriously reducing the supply of mercury, we would restrict the flow to ASGM and therefore help solve part of the end use problem. And we learned a difficult lesson that as long as the end use demand remains, the supply will appear. And so artisanal mining in Mexico had been done for a long time, but until then it was at a very low level. And the mining that turned up in Indonesia was quite a surprise for many of us. We weren't aware of Indonesia as a source. So I would say that surprises are always possible. And for this reason, we really have to address both the supply side and the demand side simultaneously in order to reduce this artisanal, the ASGM operations together.
Thank you very much, Peter. The next question is from Ken Davis. I think, Marcina, you already mentioned the different actions that were required now. And the question from Ken Davis is basically, okay, there is a need to prioritize the interventions. So what do you think about the relative cost effectiveness of three options? The first one is restricting mercury supply from primary mining. Second is preventing illegal mercury trade, or making non-mercury technology available to miners. If you had to prioritize these three options, how would you handle that?
It's an interesting question. I think where the challenge comes is that ASGM is really a livelihoods issue. And we're talking about really vulnerable populations here. And so if we restrict supply or prevent trade without supporting miners and mining population, we're actually hurting the most vulnerable communities while actually empowering criminal actors, because these goods become even more valuable on the black market. So, but at the same time, making technology that doesn't use mercury available to miners certainly has faced its challenges and has not really been successful on a large scale. There's some really great examples on smaller scales, but it hasn't been successful on a large scale. So what I would probably say, restricting supply is great, especially when we know where these places are. As Peter mentioned, organized crime's like a balloon. You squash it, it'll come out somewhere else. But I think restricting supply is always a good thing to do, especially when we know where it's coming from and the relatively limited locations. Preventing the trade, you always want to address corruption and impunity, because if you don't, criminal actors continue to operate unimpeded. So that is something we can always advocate for. And I think looking at the cost effectiveness, honestly, I think making non-mercury technology available to miners and encouraging its widespread use is probably the most expensive option. So not the most cost effective, if that's what you're looking for, but I would still say it's an essential element to any response.
Thanks a lot, Marcela. Yes, that was indeed a tricky question. I would like to go back to Ms. Insiani, please. The Bali Declaration is not a legally binding document so far. Do you think that there is a risk that a country that would not adhere to the Bali Declaration would actually negatively affect its purposes?
Yes, thank you. Sure, we need common understanding and shared commitment to fight the illegal mercury trade. The illegal trading practices could negatively affect its purpose, as the country will be unable to control the volume, distribution, and usage of mercury in its jurisdiction. Over time, we will experience increasing multiple risks, such as damaging its environment, human health, and losing its revenue one could get if the importation runs illegally. And for Indonesia, Bali Declaration will show Indonesian government stance on combating the illegal mercury trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Insiani. Going back to Peter with the next question, we've seen through your presentation that there are wide ranges in terms of estimation of mercury global trade and also probably a lack of data. How do you think that this could be improved with better? How could we have better data on mercury trade globally, but also specifically mercury trade towards ASGM?
I think, again, Jerome, you're coming up with some challenging questions here. I think that the efforts that are being made by the Bali Declaration and others to better track mercury really from origin to destination is quite important. One of our big challenges with mercury coming from Indonesia was that it was being mined on several small islands, and some was leaving the islands by boat, and some in small airplanes, and some smuggled as ore in containers before it was even refined or roasted. And so really, if we don't have a good handle on the source of mercury and the different mines and the quantities that are being produced, then it's very difficult to know how accurate our information is further down the supply chain. Beyond that, at the level of customs, there are a number of controls that can be done differently or done better. Customs officers are typically trained to look for drugs and weapons mostly, and not so well trained to look for places where mercury might be smuggled, for example. And so better controls at that level would certainly be helpful. A number of things like that. And as organizations like Marcena's understand better where the mercury is being used in the mining operations and how it gets there, then we can better address those supply chains and bring more transparency to that part of the operation as well.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Yes, I think it makes sense to start with the source and get as much as possible of the initial sources. I would just go back to Marcena and one of your slides where you mentioned about the rise of cyanide being used in the ECOWAS region to replace mercury. Do you think that it has an impact on the mercury flow to artisanal and small-scale gold mining in the region?
I think the key there is that we don't see it replacing mercury use, but rather complementing it. We have not seen a reduction in mercury use. I think it's an evolving situation. What we see with cyanide is that it is a more expensive processing technology. It also gets a lot higher quantities of gold out of ore, so it's also more profitable. But this means that more more wealthy and powerful individuals are able to use cyanide processing to capture greater portions of the gold, which is influencing financial flows and gold supply chains in the region and actually drawing them more into the criminal sector or within the grasp of criminal actors. What this means is that I think for miners at the lower levels, the artisanal miners who don't have these resources, it actually makes them more vulnerable and so more susceptible to mercury use or that sort of thing. And also with the sale of tailings to cyanide producers, that can take away at times an important income opportunity for women who can sometimes reprocess the tailings themselves. So what I would say is that we have not seen cyanide processing have an immediate impact right now on mercury flows. We're still seeing the same continued flows going. But as we move forward, I think the increase in cyanide processing is going to increase criminality and increase vulnerability of miners in the region, making efforts to tackle mercury use and formalize the sector that much more difficult going forward.
Thanks a lot, Marcena, for sharing your insights on the evolution of cyanide use in the ECOWAS region. We have time for one final question, and I think the answer will be addressed. I mean, you will be all welcome to provide your answer. The question is, okay, we focus a lot about illegal trade, and the question is whether there has been any study to review the current legal trade for allowed uses.
I can just pop in really quickly with the ECOWAS region. Not all countries in the region have actually made the mercury trade illegal. For example, in Ghana, you can legally import gold, mercury. But what we do see is that even though that is an option that is available, very few people are taking that option. And where it is legal. And so at least in the ECOWAS region, even with those legal options, a lot of the trade still is illegal or at least unreported.
I would add briefly, Jerome, that different countries have taken different approaches to the whole issue of trade. And as Marcena mentioned, there are countries where it's completely legal. There are countries where imports and or exports are illegal. And then there's prior informed consent, of course, under the Minamata Convention and other arrangements. And this is part of the difficulty in getting good information about trade and comparing one year to the next, because as these sorts of country-based regulations change, it's very difficult to see trends in the direction that we would like to see them.
Thanks a lot for the complimentary answer. And with that, we are coming to the end of this session on controlling mercury flow towards artisanal and small-scale gold mining. I would like to thank Ms. Inciani, Ms. Hunter, and Mr. Maxson for sharing their knowledge and their information about these various aspects of mercury flow towards the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector. For the questions that we could not address due to the time limitations, this will be collected and they will be answered by our experts and made available later on the planetGOLD website. And with that, I would like to thank again all the participants to that session and to invite you to join one of the two following sessions. You have the option between stage A and B following a short break. Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to be on this session with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hello and good morning or good evening, everyone, depending on which part of the globe you are. Welcome to the session on gender mapping and impact assessment during this planetGOLD Global Forum. My name is Lynn Gitu, and I'm coming to you from Kampala, Uganda in East Africa. I lead the work of the Canadian INGO Impact in the Anglophone countries of Africa's Great Lakes region. During this session on gender mapping and impact assessment, we will have 4 speakers, including myself. So I'm wearing 2 hats today. I will moderate this session and I will give the first presentation. We will have a question and answer opportunity close to the end of the session. So please keep those questions coming in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll be joined in this session by 3 other speakers, Ms. Enawati Eko Hatono, Ms. Jacqueline Bello Enricoso, and Ms. Lakavedulam Jamiandava. All right, so let's just get into my presentation on Gender Impact Assessment Toolkit for the ASM sector. So as I already mentioned, Impact is a Canadian headquartered INGO that has offices in DRC, in Uganda, and in Cote d'Ivoire. In today's presentation, I want to showcase some of our work related to gender impact assessment from our DRC-based programming and some of its results. Next slide, please. Impact's focus on gender in extractives is based on the acknowledgement that the mismanagement of natural resources highlights and in many cases fuels gender inequality. When we started to work on gender equality in ASM in 2011, it was still a niche sector, and we are glad to see that interest in this niche has grown, and more researchers, practitioners, and donors are getting interested in working towards gender equality and women's empowerment in the ASM sector. Next slide, please. Over the past decade, as Impact has led and supported gender-specific programming in ASM in a number of countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we have seen an increasing number of initiatives working towards formalization of the ASM sector, with the objective to produce more sustainable and inclusive socio-economic and environmental outcomes. But what we have also noticed is that unless formalization as reflected in laws or regulations or implemented through a specific project or program, unless this formalization specifically addresses women's unique needs, it can leave women more vulnerable, particularly in areas where security and human rights are at risk. Formalization processes, as well-intentioned as they might be, can lead to unintended negative consequences for women and amplify the existing gender inequalities that current laws fail to acknowledge. Therefore, adaptation to the specific context of ASM is key, as the specific barriers and opportunities women face in any context will definitely differ. Next slide, please. To better integrate gender equality in initiatives related to ASM, Impact developed, along with our partners, a collection of best practices for gender impact assessments that stem from our decade-long experience on the issue. We have recently pulled those resources together and combined them into a toolkit, the Gender Impact Assessment Toolkit, which is publicly available on our website, impacttransform.org. Next slide, please. The GIA toolkit can be applied to the full spectrum of ASM formalization, including ASM-related programs, processes, policies, legislations, laws, interventions, and regulations. Potential users would include civil society, mining associations and cooperatives, government, philanthropic foundations, and the private sector working in the area of ASM in developing conflict and post-conflict countries. More concretely, with the toolkit, we provide 14 strategic tools that can be freely used and further adapted. Okay, so let's take a look inside. Next slide, please. Now, GIAs are based on 4 different components of gender, which are seen on the screen. Component A, on work relations within mining areas, institutions, and at home, looks at work relations between men and women at mine sites, in structures governing the ASM sector, and also at home. It deals notably with the gender division of labor, of paid and unpaid work, and considers whether and why some tasks in ASM sites are predominantly performed by one sex or the other. Component B, personal and family relations, looks at how women in the mining community are expected to behave towards their husbands, relatives, and other women and men in society. The catalyst, the analyst or the gender analyst also tries to understand what kind of gender-based violence women face. And here we usually really widen that term to not only consider sexual, but also physical, psychological, economic, cultural, and social GBV. Under component C, we're interested in understanding how women miners are perceived by co-workers, employers, other women, and society in general. And we want to know how this is different from how men are perceived. Finally, under component D, we're looking at who is in charge of financial resources or other types of capital. We look at who makes decisions about the resource, for example, land, in regard to selling or buying it. Next slide, please. Okay, so instead of presenting each of the 14 tools that come with our kit in detail to you, I thought it might be interesting to give you a couple of examples that showcase how varied interventions in gender equality in ASM can be. These interventions in our development work have been tailored to the specific needs of the women in our project area, based on the GIA, the gender impact assessment we had carried out there, not only at the beginning of our work there, but actually pretty much consistently through a regular impact data collection between 2017 and 2020. The interventions picked here are those that reflect our bottom-up approach of working with an ASM community where the women themselves guided the way we implemented interventions. In our case, a community that lives very remotely in the equatorial forest of Eastern DRC in the Mambasa territory in Ituri, with a heavy luggage of past but also present conflict, and at the same time, a very entrenched ASM sector whose history goes back to the 19th century and that is very integrated with other livelihood sources, say farming, husbandry, retail, and or service provision. Next slide, please. So starting off with component A, I think anyone would agree that for more sustainable development results of formalization, technical assistance should be targeted towards institutions that are already in place. Such associations, cooperatives, or groups usually represent more formal ASM operations and would have some sort of governance structure and maybe some financial management like a bank account. From there, when you start to tackle things like mining licenses or improving productivity, it's easier than starting with a group that is not organized. So in this case, we looked at a women's organization that was already existing and represented the interests of local female miners. Next slide, please. In our area of intervention, we interacted with a cooperative whose internal power dynamics were very hard to overcome in the beginning. It was a cooperative led entirely by men, and an organization or association representing the interests of female miners did not yet exist. This is why we carried out a gender impact assessment and then went on to share these findings with the community members themselves via community theater, making the findings as accessible as possible. Women who were part of the assessment sample discussed the findings and determined recommendations. This allowed us to specify capacity building efforts, for example, by providing leadership training to some women who expressed interest in it, and then for the general group, trainings on human rights and such things. At the same time, this process created a dynamic where some women naturally emerged as leaders and were selected to present the policy recommendations to the local and provincial levels of government in the DRC. As a continuation of that process, the women realized they wanted to continue the important work of self-determination and representation. And so they started they started, or they formally founded, their own association, the Network for the Empowerment of Women in Mining Communities, RIAFECOM in French, that brings together nearly 400 women from a dozen communities and mine sites. Since then, some of these women from RIAFECOM have also become elected to the executive board of the local mining cooperative called CODEMA. This has increased the number of women within the cooperative. Next slide, please. To go to component B on personal and family relations, in gender-sensitive programming, considering and respecting women's and men's perspectives is key for creating sustainable gender equality results, and also to not cause harm. Specifically in the mining sector, as women gain autonomy and dedicate more time to income-generating activities, they might become less available for reproductive activities like childcare, food preparation, collecting water and food, or subsistence agriculture, and that causes some problems. Next slide, please. This is why our interventions provide a lot of sensitization and human rights-based trainings. In this data example, we can see how the perception of women wanting to have paid work outside the home is different between our target group and our control groups, but also between men and women within each group. This social acceptance of female autonomy is a necessity to provide women with opportunities to fully participate in ASM just like any other paid work. Next slide, please. Going a bit further, and in the more intimate space of women and men, our work touches on the awareness of some fundamental women's rights. Here, the attitude towards wife beating is one of the most classical survey questions around GBV. This graph clearly shows that in the impact project area, wife beating is more considered unjustified than in the control group area. Next slide, please. On to component C, rules and norms relating to gender in the mining community. Now, looking at these rules, here we were interested in influencing how women and their rights are perceived by their society and how this is different from how men are perceived. What we found is that the perception of insecurity remains an important factor that influences if and when and where women, but also men, fetch water, for example, get food or go to work in rural remote mining areas. Working on improving community security was in this case taken on by the community collectively. Next slide, please. Quickly from this slide, we see that in partnership with local civil society, there was participative mapping of surrounding communities and mine sites, and these women established 14 community-based peace hubs in villages and mine sites. The Peace Hub members, about 60 women, were trained in conflict prevention and resolution and have then organized a series of 5 dialogues across the communities. Thanks to the mediation of these Peace Hubs, around 90 local conflicts were resolved peacefully. Next slide, please. Seeing women intervening as mediators, the overall perception of women's roles in the community changed. As a consequence, when being asked whether women have their say in, for example, land disputes, the large majority of men and women in our target group does confirm that women definitely should be consulted. Next slide, please. Finally, when we talk about access to distribution and use of resources, here we looked at mostly about land, because land is the main resource. Next slide, please. We piloted a village savings and loans association at the mine camps and in villages. Membership was open to all community members based on pre-established trust. This way, we're able to reach women who are not only identifying themselves as miners, but also women who circulate in that space in a more occasional manner. For example, women subsistence farmers who would lend a hand during periods when their farm work doesn't necessarily need any input. Next slide, please. Just to talk a little bit about village saving community lending schemes. It's just based on small groups of people who come together and share monies, and this contributes to the incomes of miners. We know that in the mining sector and the ASM sector, one of the biggest challenges is capital. Next slide, please. Over 1,400 women and men across the territory formed 50 groups with a total of over $45,000 savings after 1 year. Next slide, please. So as we close, this brings us back to how mining in the territory we worked with here was actually embedded in the local economy. As I said earlier, women and men are not always exclusive miners. They much rather tend to take the money they made in mining to invest in other livelihoods. We saw that happening a lot and increasing women's income streams. Next slide, please. In conclusion, interventions in ASM can be varied as the needs, can be as varied as the needs and realities of women in those communities. Given this variety of contexts and roles of women, the use of tools for gender impact assessments is imperative. If we bring women into the process of identifying or assessing their barriers, priorities, and solutions, then these solutions are more likely to become viable and sustainable. I thank you very much for listening, and there's more information about impact on our website, impacttransform.org. All right, we will move on to the next presentation given by Ms. Enawati Eko Hatono, who is a gender specialist in the mining sector and currently serves as the gender focal point of Ministry of Environment and Forestry with the Republic of Indonesia. She will be presenting on evaluation of gender dimensions of ASGM projects in Indonesia. Enawati, please go ahead.
Can you hear my voice? Yeah. Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening from Indonesia. Please allow me, Ernawati Eko Hartono, as a gender focal point of Ministry of Environment and Forestry Republic of Indonesia. And we are the main counterpart of the implementation project of GOLD ISMEA and under cooperation with the National Research and Innovation Agency and also supported by GEF and UNDP Indonesia. So in this regard, I would like to share with you the result of the gender mapping, and currently we are doing the impact assessment regarding the implementation gender dimension under the project of GOLD ISMEA in Indonesia. Next slide. Here there are 5 main issues regarding the result of gender mapping in Indonesia that we found as the main or the key issues in the ASGM sector in Indonesia, as well as the gender and equality in the ASGM. The first one is about the control. Compare the main miners, women miners, they don't have a such power over resources, capital, land, and means of production. Sometimes they don't have to participate in the political decision-making process that take place in the mining community as well as in the village. Regarding the participant, women miners compared men miners create institutional and social obstacle in participating quantitatively and qualitatively in a public policy-making process. And also sometimes they are not being involved significantly. And the women miners also exclude from various activities in the village and sometimes never have access to participate. Regarding critical awareness, there is no awareness in participating to conserve the environment in relation to water, land, and air condition, waste processing, and sanitation. Regarding the critical awareness, only a few women miners have attempts to challenge about the gender bias norms and practices in ASGM in the early days, proving the key were able to become pit teachers, breaking down feminine masculine construction. And we found there are 2 of them are trommel owners in the field, but there is no awareness in participating to conserve the environmental relationship to water, land, and air condition, waste processing, and sanitation in the mining area. Regarding to the access, we also found it is difficult to gain access to training, capacity building, information, economic empowerment, new technological skill, quality health services, formal financial institution service, alternative or option for complaint and protection system, or mechanism against gender-based violence. Regarding welfare condition, we found income obtained from gold mining does not have a positive correlation with the welfare of women miners in those families. Women carry multiple burdens, health risks, do not have alternative livelihoods, live with poor sanitation, have low education, and are vulnerable to gender-based violence. Next slide. Considering to this result that we found during gender mapping to the projects, conduct some intervention under the four component, and we try to develop gender sensitive intervention is being implemented until now under each component. And the first component regarding how to put gender dimension to strengthening the institution and the policy regulatory framework for Mercury free SGM goal ISMEA project developer gender mainstreaming guideline in ASGM that being developed for almost 1 year participate by the gender expert in Indonesia as well as written by the well-known organization, and the substance also should be in line with the Indonesian policy and regulatory framework. And currently, the gender mainstreaming guideline is being finalized and ready to disseminate to the government and local government institutions regarding to how the project support financial lending arrangement to provide loan for mercury-free processing equipment. The project developed women miners cooperative in assisting in developing loan proposal that meet gender inclusion plan. Under the third component about the increasing capacity for mercury-free ESGM provision, technical assistance, and technology transfer. The project developed gender training module for ESGM miners and advocacy to developer on the gender-sensitive technology. Under the last component of the project regarding the awareness raising, the project conduct the webinars by inviting the gender expert as well as the men and women miner to obtain the perspective regarding the sanitation, regarding positive possibility about the woman empowerment, about the community ESGM, and also the project already developed fact sheet and provide it to the project website. Development gender training module for ASGM and minors and advocacy to developer or gender sensitive technology. Next slide. So it's already almost 2.5 years the implementation of the project, and the project also currently conduct the midterm review and evaluation of the gender dimension of ESGM project in Indonesia by inviting an external gender expert to conduct the impact assessment, and this regard the evaluation type is about before and after evaluation. This type of evaluation inviting several key informants. There are community level, micro level, meso level, and macro level. There are 7 key gender mainstreaming components based on of the Indonesian Constitution about the gender mainstreaming approach should be conducted and include 7 key points below. There are commitment, policy, institutional, resources, the availability, disaggregated data, tools, community participation, and innovation. Other the 7 key gender mainstreaming component, the project is being assessed toward to the 4th component that being implemented during almost 3 years. Next slide. Here, preliminary findings after several interview conducted by the evaluator. The evaluator find out some regulation have proposed by project that are adopted by the government to mainstreaming gender in ASGM regulation. Second is studies or assessment involving community institution, academics, and the business world were used as input for the development of the project intervention in ESGM sector. So the project are already aware how to reshaping the intervention based on the evidence base and the facts from the field. And the third one, gender mainstreaming working group for ASGM still ad hoc for relevant government intuition. So this is regard it needs to be institutionalized to ensure that the intervention will be sustainable. Next slide. There are three lesson learned and recommendation for this time being after the project conducted to assessment. The first line is gender assessment should be able to look at gender mainstreaming issues. Gender is not only women issues, but also to look opportunity to involve men, other community member, existing policies, and identifying gender champion. Second one is to maintain support on the having a buy-in from partner, from our institution, the government of Indonesia. The project should be aligned with their gender roadmap to secure the gender commitment and sustainable research. The last one, we also recommend and based on the lesson learned, find out the discussion with the relevant counterpart. It is possible to undertake gender mainstreaming without significantly altering the project outcomes and output. Next slide. So, how we ensure that the sustainability and replicability will be done in this project, we find out that the mining cooperatives and women group members are trained in gender concept. So we expect them as a gender champion could sustain and share their knowledge to the young generation. Second one is engaging provincial and regency government to build responsibility and develop center of excellence. So it's part of the exit strategy of the project called ISMIA. And the last one, in engaging with youth as catalysts and messengers. This is also the key to ensure the sustainability of the project intervention and the replicable in the future. So Gold ISMIA project is proposing sustainability strategy on gender mainstreaming. Next slide. I think that's all from my side. Hopefully, I already shared briefly about how we conduct the gender mapping and issues that we found out at the field level and how we overcome based on this fact and how implementation of the project based on gender-sensitive approach being measured during this year. Thank you for your attention. Should you have any question, please also provide in the box. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Anawati, for sharing these reflections from Indonesia. Next, we will have Ms. Jacqueline Bello Enricoso, who is a women's rights advocate in the Philippines. She's at present working as the National Gender Specialist of the planetGOLD program in Philippines. She will be presenting on lessons learned from the gender mapping of the ASGM sector in the Philippines and development of a gender action plan. She has prepared a pre-recorded presentation, and so we'll just share it with you now.
In the Philippines, gender in small-scale mining is relatively a new discourse. There has not been significant efforts to mainstream gender in small-scale mining. There is not enough literature that thoroughly examines gender gaps in small-scale mining. For this reason, we hope this gender mapping study will serve as a catalyst to drive action and interest from different stakeholders in Philippine small-scale mining. I will be discussing with you the major findings and the lessons learned from the gender mapping study. I will also present the Gender Action Plan of planetGOLD Philippines and Mongolia. These are the objectives of the gender mapping study. It mainly identifies gender issues in small-scale mining. We aim to get as much data as we can from the ground so that we can have more tailored and evidence-based project planning. Though we examine the situation of both women and men, we make an extra mile to highlight the challenges of women in particular. Because most often, women are unheard of, and most often, their needs are not considered in programs, planning, and services related to small-scale mining. We have conducted the gender mapping studies in our two project sites, Sagada Mountain Province and Paracale, Camarines Norte. We collected data from desk research, survey with miners, focus group discussion with women miners, and key informant interviews. For the gender mapping study, I would like to highlight four themes: the roles of women in small-scale mining, the decision-making and leadership roles of women in small-scale mining, the challenges of women in small-scale mining, recommendation of small-scale mining stakeholders. In general, majority of the women in small-scale mining perform flexible, seasonal, and low-paying jobs. They usually perform individual tasks in small-scale mining. Most of them are involved in highly informal mining activities. Though not very common, there are also women who earn much as financiers, ball mill owners, and gold traders. The common activities of women are collecting waste ore for mining groups, mucking or sorting waste ore, gold processing, auxiliary support to mining groups, working as officers in mining associations, working in secondary economies and small-scale mining. In our surveys and interviews, we try to look at some of the factors why women have limited tasks in small-scale mining. The findings of our study show that physical limitation of women, cultural beliefs and gender norms, and the lack of safety measures for women are the main reasons of women's limited participation in small-scale mining. On physical limitation, both men and women think that some tasks in small-scale mining are too heavy for women. On cultural beliefs and gender norms, some miners believe that women should not enter the shafts or tunnel because they bring bad luck, especially if they have menstruation. Miners also believe that the nature of mining work is not safe for women. On decision-making and leadership, we look at three areas: women's participation in small-scale mining operation, women's participation in small-scale mining associations, and beliefs in women's leadership. In small-scale mining operation, women have limited participation in decision-making because most often they're excluded in mining groups and underground work. Unless they become financiers of mining groups, women cannot direct mining operations. On a positive note, women members and officers have active participation in decision-making of mining associations. Also, most miners believe that women can be leaders in small-scale mining. We have categorized the challenges of women into four themes: limited access to resources and benefits, poor working conditions of women, unpaid care work, and violence against women. One of the main challenges of women is their limited access to resources and benefits. When we say resources, we're referring to the things they need in order to have a sustainable livelihood in mining. Based on our survey, more women compared to men think they are not earning enough to meet their family's needs. This is largely due to women's exclusion in profit-sharing scheme. For women to be part of a profit-sharing scheme, they have to be financiers or tunnel owners. Furthermore, most women are not members of mining associations. Without a formal entity such as a mining association, they have limited protection and benefits. In general, women in small-scale mining are placed in a disadvantaged position because of their sex, social ties, and physical ability. Generally, both men and women are exposed to poor working conditions in small-scale mining. What we would like to highlight is that women face particular occupational health hazards and risks that are not covered by the current regulatory framework of occupational safety and health. This is simply because they are not counted as minors or registered workers of small-scale mining. Women working outside their social network do not feel safe working in the mining site. Furthermore, informal rules of women's entry in the mining site reinforce discriminatory practices against women. For example, miners believe women should not enter the site to prevent prostitution. Women are also at risk of losing their jobs due to the informal nature of women's work in small-scale mining. Women are burdened by unpaid care work, which hinders their participation in mining activities and community activities. In Paracale, have limited participation in organizational activities because of the domestic duties. In Sagada, women have to cut the number of hours at work. Some women bring their children in the mining site occasionally. Violence against women also remains a gender issue in small-scale mining. There are two forms of violence against women that emerged during our data gathering. One is domestic violence, as stated by one of our interviewees. Second is prostitution. Prostitution is prevalent when gold mining is booming. We asked women and other stakeholders on what can be done to improve the situation of women in small-scale mining. These are some of the recommendations. First, sustainable livelihood, organizing women, safety and gender-responsive measures in the mining site, formalizing small-scale mining operation, awareness raising on violence against women, and government program. For small-scale mining to be gender equitable, women should be purposefully included in government programming. As mentioned by one of women officers, for women to have more involvement and exposure in small-scale mining, there should be a government program. Women cannot easily enter small-scale mining when there's no government program for them. Based on our findings of the gender mapping study, there is a clear gender divide in the sector of small-scale mining. As project implementers, we gain some lessons on how to move forward with gender mainstreaming in small-scale mining. One is to increase visibility of women in small-scale mining. The lack of complete sexist aggregated data shows there's a systematic erasure of women's participation in small-scale mining. Stories of women in small-scale mining are fragmented and scarce. Second is to recognize women's contribution and potential in small-scale mining. Though women are underrepresented in mining association, they contribute much to the success of formalizing a mining operation. They are the backbone of mining association. Even women who do not work underground have a huge role to play for the safety of miners and safeguarding the environment. If given adequate training, they can do more than what they are currently doing in small-scale mining. Lastly, this is only possible if we open opportunities for them through dialogues and gender-responsive programs. Moving forward, the planetGOLD Philippines and Mongolia are carrying out a gender action plan. This serves as a framework for designing project interventions on gender. The project aims to mainstream gender in the following entry points: project management, knowledge, policies, capacity, advocacy, awareness, and practices. On project management, we train project staff on gender basic concepts so that they can appreciate why a gender perspective is needed for the project. On knowledge, we aim to close the data gaps on gender in ASGM. At present, there's not enough information on gender in ASGM. Through our gender mapping study and gender analysis report, we have generated rich data that can be used in project and government planning. On policy, we did assessment of legal framework on gender and small-scale mining. On capacity, the Philippine project team conducted a series of workshops with government stakeholders to build their gender competencies. On advocacy, the Philippines and Mongolia developed information education communication materials. On awareness, both project teams developed training modules that can be used to sensitize minors on gender issues in ASGM. On practices, our goal is to improve women's access to resources where they lag behind. The Philippines and Mongolia set a quota of female participants in each planetGOLD training. In the Philippines, where women are highly marginalized in small-scale mining, the project team has planned training activities specific to women's needs with the goal of improving their access to resources. We are hoping to conscientize more government officials, more minors to take action, and more women to raise their voices. Last December, we had a gender mainstreaming workshop. with the gender focus and small-scale mining focus of the Bureau of Mines and Geosciences. Recently, we just finished an advocacy training with women in small-scale mining. Our male miners also expressed interest to be gender equality champions in the sector during our gender sensitivity training. With that being said, we hope small-scale mining communities will understand that responsible mining also means adopting gender equitable practices. To stress this point, I would like to borrow a quote from one of our male miners. Gender equality is important in small-scale mining. So that we can protect each other's rights, we need to ensure that everyone has equal rights and that no one is abused, maltreated, and left behind. That's it for my presentation. Thank you for listening. I hope this has given you insights on gender and ASGM.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for that presentation. Jacqueline is available for any questions or comments that we might have in the audience. Finally, we will have another pre-recorded presentation from Ms. Lakavedilam Jamiandava, who is an emerging gender equality practitioner and researcher based in Mongolia. She is currently part of the planetGOLD program in Mongolia and is happy to work in the ASGM sector. She will be presenting on lessons learned from the gender mapping of the ASGM sector of Mongolia and gender action plan. Please, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box that is on the right-hand side of your screen. Let's have the presentation from Mongolia, please.
Thank you for joining planetGOLD Global Forum. My name is Labuktolim Jamiandagwa, and I'm gender specialist for planetGOLD Mongolia project. Now I am going to talk about lessons learned from the gender mapping in the ASGM sector in Mongolia and the project Gender Action Plan. First, I would like to emphasize that gender is one of the most important goals of our project and important aspect of the responsible mining practice. Thus, we have two baseline documents for gender, namely UNIDO's Gender Analysis and Gender Mainstreaming Action Plan, GEF Policy on Gender Equality. Based on these two documents, we developed our own projects, Internal Gender Guideline and Gender Sections in the Contextual Study and other analysis. In addition, we have a Gender Action Plan that shows the details of all gender-related activities. Accordingly, gender is considered as a cross-cutting theme and gender is mainstreamed in all aspects of the project. Here is the report on the gender mapping in the ASGM sector. In terms of methodology, data collection was part of the contextual study work, employing both quantitative and qualitative methods as shown in this slide. To be precise, we conducted survey, key informant interviews, in-depth interviews, and desktop research. It covered all 5 project sites as shown in Figure 1. The objectives were to summarize the gender dynamics in the ASGM sector and their social and economic implications on the women miners, and to inform project activities for the mainstreaming gender. We have a number of findings, and here are the key findings. As for the gender ratio work time in the sector, approximately 30% of miners are women, and women tend to work for less period in a seasonal manner. Gender division of labor was observed for the ASGM sites with relatively equal pay. For example, top 5 tasks that men perform are the crushing or planning or extraction tasks underground and grinding, while the top 4 tasks women perform are all supportive services, food preparation, purchasing food, other items, washing dishes, and cleaning. 36% of female respondents say that ASGM is their only income source, while it was 32% for men. In terms of the decision-making and leadership role, the women participate with relatively equal power. In particular, women participate in decisions related to administrative issues. However, certain differences were observed. As we can see from the figure 3, men are highly involved in making decisions related to ore extraction, processing, while women are often involved in the waste disposal, administrative decision, and sourcing inputs. On the other hand, women are less involved in decision-making in more conservative areas with strong traditional norms. Considering the smaller share of the women in the survey population, 22% of the all organized women miners were leaders versus 14% of all organized women miners covered by the study. In terms of the preference for the leadership, although the majority prefer a male leader, women were more in favor of the female leader than men. Gender preference for leadership is varied among the 5 study areas, depending on the level of experience with the female leadership in that area, which means that when they have the current female leadership, they tend to prefer female leaders. Women miners are acknowledged that the management skills of the women leaders were better, for example, in terms of the managing finance or compliance with legal frameworks. In domestic sphere, women bear the main responsibility for most domestic work, especially cooking, laundry, cleaning, and caring for children and elderly, which leads to women having the double burden. Whereas men are mainly responsible for the domestic work outside the house, such as collecting water, firewood, and coal. In terms of the capacity building, women were actively participating in all training topics covered by the survey, especially business management, environmentally sound practices, rehabilitation, and health. Training on gender and human rights was the topic list attended by the respondents, as minors don't have a sufficient understanding of what it would entail. The least number of people point out is an important topic of the capacity building. Gender-based violence found out to be prevalent in the areas with poverty, alcohol abuse, and strong traditional gender norms. In summary, there are certain opportunities for women to act as change agents for formalization and compliance with existing regulations, as we can see from this slide. There are also challenges related to women's involvement in mining and domestic work. Based on these findings, recommendations were to collect gender disaggregated data for evidence-based decision-making, improve existing labor policy, improve gender and human rights training within the sector, establish and promote women's organization at mine site. Now I move on to the Gender Action Plan part, which is informed by the findings of the Gender Mapping Report. Here is the list of the planned activities and their timelines. Activities related to project management, knowledge, policies, awareness are mostly completed since the project beginning, including gender guideline, gender training for team members, a tracker of project activities with gender component, contextual study, gender mapping study, separate analysis, gender sensitivity assessment of the legal framework analysis, development and delivery of gender and human rights training, and train the trainer. Now we are paying more attention to the capacity building at the government level, especially for the local government officials on gender mainstream, in order to improve policy support of minors at provincial level. These trained government officials will be also invited to other gender-related activities such as gender committee. Another area we are focusing on is advocacy, including development of the information materials, training of the gender focal point, and pilot gender committee. Here I would like to highlight some of the most important activities. First one is the training of the gender focal points. At each project area, 2 gender focus, including 1 woman and 1 man, will be appointed by the mine community and build their capacity on the first aid, formalization, access to finance, etc. These trained focal points can act as a change agents and role models for others, as well as a focal points of grievance systems for grieving mechanism for gender-related complaint. They are also expected to contribute to other project-related agendas such as local advocacy, awareness raising on formalization, responsible mining practice, and better relations with relevant stakeholders. The second highlight activity is the launch of the Gender Committee, which will be building on the gender focal point training. It will serve as an informal and voluntary network of artisanal miners and an open platform for dialogue on existing and emerging issues on gender equality and human rights. Gender Committee will be piloted in Seling Province and expected to be disseminated to other project sites. Regular meetings and facilitated discussion will be encouraged by the providing space and offering additional training that supports better mining practices. Third highlight activity is the past gender and human rights training in 3 target provinces. Total 28 female and 42 male artisanal miners attended the training, and training contains introduction, human rights, gender equality, call for action sessions. In-person meetings and participatory exercises and teamworks are the best approaches for gender training. Contextualizing the training content with artisanal mining cases and examples was a game changer. Informal and conversational facilitation was well perceived by the participants. Average knowledge increase was 15 to 31%. Here are some feedbacks from the training. In general, participants understand the importance of the human rights and gender topics and decided to apply their learnings in their work and life. On the other hand, some participants understand the power dynamic issue and appreciated the introspection drawing sessions. In conclusion, here are the main lessons learned. Formalization of the ASGM sector, along with collecting gender disaggregated data for evidence-based decision-making, improving gender-responsive policy, raising awareness on gender and human rights, and establishing and promoting gender committees will further empower women miners. Intersectional, for example, education and marital status, and operational, for example, type of ore deposit, level of mechanization, level of formalization. Such intersectional and operational lens and women miners might be needed. Human rights can be an anchor for advocacy for formalization and policy level support. So gender and human rights topics should be communicated to the broader extent. One-time activity won't create the desired change, so series of capacity building activities should be carried out, for example, through gender committee. In addition to considering the different needs and priorities of the artisanal miners, training activities should be participatory and exercise-based. Patriarchy and social cultural norms are most likely to be at play in all aspects of the woman miner. Consistent application of the gender-responsive approach is crucial for the greater impact of the project activities. In the end, I would like to highlight that all these are the team efforts of the planetGOLD Mongolia team, and thank you all for your attention.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Lakavejilam. We are really pressed for time. We have a couple of questions left, given to us in the chat. However, we might not have very much time to answer them. One of the questions related to perception of the actions of the projects that we have all presented on, especially from male miners who are old-fashioned, who have old-fashioned values like a man is stronger than a woman and so on. I wonder, Jacqueline, could you just quickly speak into that? Would you be able to speak to that? And then the other question
Yes.
is on sustainability. All this progress, how do we sustain it?
Okay. Yeah. For the question number one, to address that, we have male miners, as what you've mentioned. There are male miners who keep old-fashioned values, but what the action that we've taken is we conducted a gender sensitivity training. So we made a training module designed to sensitize male miners, and we hope that that training module will serve as something that can be included in the regular programming of government or different civil society. So we created a training module, and we already conducted it, and we hope that we can promote that training module to other agencies who would like to continue conducting gender sensitivity regularly in small scale mining. And for the question number two, if how do we ensure sustainability? First, we engage at the government level. We're looking forward to have a policy that will institutionalize mainstreaming gender in small scale mining. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. Thank you to the panelists. Our contact information is available at the planetGOLD website. If you have any questions or comments or inquiries, please reach out to us in that way. Thank you, everybody, for your time and your participation. Have a good day.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the planetGOLD Forum. I hope you've all had the opportunity to participate in some of the events so far, which have been full of new information. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone of the following ground rules and tips for our successful session. As this event is going to be interpreted in 3 languages, the speakers are going to make a special effort to speak clearly and at a moderate pace for the benefits of the interpreters. All the speakers will have been asked to keep to their limit of 12 minutes, as overruns are difficult to deal with, so we will be doing our best to stay in that time frame. And for those of you who are listening and participating in the question and answer session, if for some reason we do not get to any of the questions, please know that they will be collected, answered, and shared on the planetGOLD website following the end of this event. So I am Tim Tier, and I am both your moderator and your facilitator for today. And I have the first presentation, so if we could go to that right away, I would appreciate it. I am an international senior scientist and director of the Climate Change Program at the Biodiversity Research Institute, or BRI, in the United States. BRI has been very involved in the Minamata Convention on Mercury since its beginning. I have worked on research projects related to the impact of air pollution on ecosystems in the Northeast US, as well as mercury impacts to songbirds. My current research includes mapping the threat of mercury contamination to nature and people around the world, and using this to build robust mercury monitoring programs. Today, I would like to focus on mercury monitoring in Indonesia. Next slide, please. This presentation focuses on the recent advances that have occurred in Indonesia, which we think are significant and important globally. The Minamata Convention is working towards a set of monitoring priorities, advanced most recently by the COP 4.2 discussions in Bali. The top figure here box represents the 3 broad areas to consider monitoring at the global level, referred to as focal matrices, which are air, biota, or living things, and humans. The middle figure is the current Indonesian focus on monitoring ASGM, or as we know, artisanal and small-scale gold mining, which add in 2 abiotic or non-living matrices of sediment and soils and water. The bottom box illustrates the criteria for site selection for initial mercury monitoring of ASGM impacts in selected areas where there would be evidence of 1, human dietary exposure, such as from local fisheries, 2, high trophic level species where mercury is expected to biomagnify or potentially bioaccumulate, and 3, species of commercial or economic interest. The rest of this presentation will provide more details on each of these areas of interest. Next slide, please. For monitoring people, non-invasive biomarkers are preferred by the Minamata Convention to sample mercury, which leads to the monitoring of 2 particular biomarkers: urine, which is associated with the occupational mercury exposure, and hair, which is associated with what people eat. Next slide, please. A key reason that Indonesia focuses on the impacts of ASGM to people and nature is that ASGM is by far the largest contributor to Indonesia's emissions, as seen in figure B on the right. This is also of global importance because Indonesia's emissions are significant enough to register at the global level, as seen by the figure A on the left. Next slide, please. In a recent project supported by the World Bank and in collaboration with Nexus 3 and BRI, samples were collected to look at the levels of mercury in all three major groups referred to as the abiotic, biotic, and human compartments seen here. Using published mercury safety levels for humans, which you can see on this graph as the solid black vertical line, collectively, all three major compartments were well above safety thresholds. I would first like to focus on humans, outlined in red by the red box, where both invasive techniques, which are gathering blood, and non-invasive techniques, hair and urine samples, were collected. Here, in all three cases, samples were well above safety thresholds, and in particular, average blood levels were more than 10 times above safety thresholds. Next figure, please. In this figure, the dark blue bars represent the percentage of samples that were above safety thresholds, divided into groups of people that were considered A, directly involved in ASGM activity, B, indirectly involved, and C, the children associated with these testing groups. I want to draw attention to the bottom figure outlined in red. When all the biomarkers are combined, both the hair, the urine, and the blood, we see that large portions of Indonesian society were contaminated well above safety thresholds. These included 3/4 of the adults involved in ASGM, over half the adults indirectly involved, and almost half of the children sampled. Next slide, please. When this information was compared with a separate global study of mercury contamination in humans, it showed that Indonesia was had one of the highest relative percentages of mercury in human hair above human safety standards. This obviously is of significant concern to Indonesia and Indonesians. Next slide, please. When we consider that human hair is a good indicator of dietary intake of mercury, then we should look at a different compartment, the biotic compartment, which includes plants and fish. And here we found that the plants and fish measured in this study were also well above safety thresholds, noting that many of these plants and some of these fish were popular food items. Next slide, please. Surprisingly, average fish levels were not above safety thresholds, which raised several important issues. I'm sorry, can you go back to the last slide? I advanced too quickly. Yes, thank you. The first issue is that there were far fewer fish samples collected than any other group. This can be seen by the numbers on the right. Fish sample size in red text are the lowest. And as we will see, there is so much variability in fish as a group that it requires much more sampling to present an accurate picture of this food source. Now on to the next slide, please. In this illustration, you can see a number of fish groups on the left and the sample sizes for each. They may be quite small, the text may be quite small, but I hope you can see them. The important point is that only one group has a sample size of 5 or more, the parrotfish. And note that these species are distributed across both freshwater fish, represented by green bars, and marine fish, represented by blue bars. Any fish group with values above the yellow dotted line require caution when eating, and any fish above the solid red line should be avoided when eating. While some fish species are more at risk of contamination than others, the true risk is not yet known for Indonesia. Next slide, please. To put this information in context, we developed a global map that shows the risk of mercury contamination that you can see here. This map combines two factors that influence mercury impacts to people and nature. The first is the risk of mercury contamination from anthropogenic sources like ASGM emissions and releases. and the second is the sensitivity of those ecosystems to mercury methylation that transforms inorganic mercury to organic mercury and enables it to enter the food web. This is where the abiotic components mentioned above factor in. Next slide, please. When we look closely at Indonesia, we see that it is largely colored yellow or darker, indicating medium to high threat levels. The high level of threat across Indonesia can be seen in box C and is a result of both high levels of risk across the country seen in box B on the right and high levels of ecosystem sensitivity seen in box A on the left. Next slide, please. Looking at this differently and using the pixels from the global map in the figure on the left, we can see the fingerprint of Indonesia as seen by the red dots. Overall, Indonesia has both high sensitivity and high risk scores. In the figure on the right, when we compared Indonesia to 7 other locations in 3 continents with known levels of mercury contamination, we found that Indonesia had the highest level of threat and the highest level of ecosystem sensitivity of all the other countries and the second highest level of risk. Next slide, please. Taken together, this illustrates that Indonesia's global significance in mercury monitoring. Given the high levels of ASGM activity, the high levels of mercury threat, risk, and ecosystem sensitivity, combined with the high levels of mercury impact to all 3 major components of abiotic and biotic indicators, as well as human biomarkers, it's clear that Indonesia is of global importance. More monitoring of the biotic world, particularly sources of food that are directly linked to mercury exposure, such as fish and birds, that can be tracked by non-invasive monitoring of human hair, remains a top priority. There is also a need to collect all data sets that have any information on mercury exposure to build a more comprehensive understanding of the levels of contamination across this diverse country. And finally, it will be critical to continue working with Indonesia government to advance the standardization of mercury monitoring to assess trends over time and the effectiveness of strategies designed to reduce mercury impacts. Thank you very much. That ends my presentation. And now I would like to hand it over to Yunyun Ismawati. I want to introduce Yunyun, who is a senior advisor of Nexus 3 Foundation. Yunyun holds an environmental engineering bachelor's degree from the Bandung Institute of Technology in Indonesia and an MSc in environmental change and management from the University of Oxford. Yunyun has more than 25 years of experience in environmental health and is actively involved in negotiation and advocacy of chemical and waste conventions. In 2000, she co-founded Bali Focus, which was later rebranded as the Nexus for Health, Environment, and Development Foundation, or referred to as Nexus 3. And Yunyun, thank you very much, and we're very glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Tim. I'm pleased to join this forum. So as Tim already gave the introduction, I would like to continue by presenting and sharing our works in Indonesia. This project is supported by the US Department of State and partially supported by the World Bank. Next, please. In Indonesia, we have identified about 190 regencies all over Indonesia out of 500 something of regencies that hosted artisanal small-scale gold mining activities. At the moment, more than 1,200,000 miners are registered as the artisanal and small-scale miners within the Association of Artisanal Miners. and more than 10 millions of people are considered as a population at risk. This list of regencies are also available or found in the presidential decree stipulating the National Action Plan to reduce and eliminate mercury in Indonesia. Overall, miners claim that they use about 3,500 tons of mercury per year to produce about 100 until 175 tons of gold per year. A study identified about 125,000 hectares of degraded land due to illegal mining and also other activities. Next, please. As Tim already mentioned, we found also cases of mercury intoxication in more than 70% of adults and almost 50% of children in some sites. And this is concerning because many children and also adults, including minors, are heavily, severely affected by mercury intoxication. Next, please. Tim already mentioned this, and the release from artisanal small-scale gold mining contributed to the 60% of the Indonesian emissions nationally. And also about 60% of these emissions goes to the air. The rest of them goes to the water and soil. Next, please. Our project, supported by the U.S. Department of State, consisted of 3 or 4 components. One is the first one is to assist the development of national and local action plans in several sites to restrict the mercury use and phase out mercury use, including identifying the byproducts from oil and gas. And component 2 is consisted of activities assisting the development of National Action Plan and Local Action Plan. The National Action Plan already existed, but we try to provide supplemental information about the mercury storage that also address and monitor the mercury supplies and trade. And then the component 3 is developing recommendations for mercury storage, for confiscated mercury especially, and mercury waste. And component 4 is consisting of development of strategy and recommendations for mercury monitoring in ASGM hotspots, including mercury supplies from primary mining and to restrict its trade. Next, please. The situations of mercury supplies and trade in Indonesia is, I simplify it with this slide. So the mining is taking place in West Seram Island, where communities mining it by the cliff and also process it, clean it, and wash the ore in Seram Island to be transferred to Java, mainly to be processed and smelted, like the picture also shared by Peter Maxson earlier. This mercury also packed in flask. Actually, it's various size and types of flask that they use, and also sell it online, mainly small sizes like 1 kilograms that you can find in any e-commerce platforms in Indonesia. Next, please. The challenges we face is in Indonesia is that first is about the regulatory framework. Currently, mercury is not necessarily a prohibited substances and it still can be traded or used for limited purposes. And then there is no regulations also to ban the exportation of mercury and cinnabar. And then mercury also trade through online platform. It's not heavily regulated, and currently the regulations about e-commerce are still at the final discussion. And the policy for phasing out mercury in products is still partial and not touching the issue of mercury in products that are agreed under the Minamata Convention. About law enforcement, as of January 2022, that we monitored online and also from some sources, more than 60 tons of mercury already confiscated since 2019. I'm sorry, that's a mistake there. It's supposed to be 2019. After the Indonesian government ratified the Minamata Convention. However, the processing of mercury, confiscated mercury is not necessarily as a crime. And the law enforcement is still focusing on the small players and not the big players. There is a need to identify the safe method to store confiscated mercury and withdraw it from the market safely. And there is a need to develop the guidance to implement court orders regarding the destruction or the disposal of mercury once the verdict set by the judges. Next, please. We support the Indonesian government Bali Declaration last March. This is also demonstrate the strong position of the Indonesian government to combat the illegal mercury trade that still heavily existed in Indonesia. Next, please. For that, in this project, we propose a sustainable system of mercury and cinnabar storage and potential disposal options for Indonesia. The challenges that we face are widespread, and as we know, many ASGM are located in remote areas. And illicit domestic cinnabar mining and mercury productions. No interim storage at the moment available following the principle of the environmental sound management system. And then currently there is no elemental mercury waste treatment and stabilization facility. And there is no disposal facility. So this lack of infrastructures adding to the complexity of the management of mercury and cinnabar. Next, please. What we mean with the environmental sound storage of mercury consisted of several principles and approaches. For instance, reducing the overall environmental contamination and human exposure, and then reduce the exposure to authorities who confiscate and handle the illicit mercury, and then provide safe and secure destination for confiscated and surplus mercury, and also to reduce exposures to medical workers who handle the medical devices containing mercury. And ESM also can prevent the circulations of mercury into ASGM hotspots again, and assist the national inventory and stockpiling reporting, as well as facilitate the establishment of mercury treatment and stabilization infrastructure. And next, please. From this project, which is also conducted by in partner with IPEN, GI Talk, and CRPG, Center for Regulatory Regulations, Policy and Governance. We have identified also a couple of scenarios to store the mercury confiscated. We call it scenario 1, where all the confiscated mercury at the local level will be collected at the provincial level and then eventually bring to one site. Next, please. And the scenario 2, considering there is currently there is no infrastructures in Indonesia, the scenario 2 proposed the exportation of mercury. Next, please. Also, this project produce training and training modules and will provide capacity buildings for local government, how to handle confiscated mercury, and then also identify the contaminated sites and contribute to the development of informed choices for options for management and remediations of contaminated sites. Next, please. And the way forward, the follow-up of this project will be continue conducting biomonitoring, as Tim already mentioned earlier, with the ecosystem threat and risk. We need to establish more network and capacity building to monitor mercury in Indonesia, and also develop a program called CHIME, Children's Health Interventions in Mercury Polluted Environment, which provide tools to assess the children's health conditions and medical treatment needed, and then capacity building for mothers, teachers, and health workers to manage to take care of their children, especially, and to understand children with special needs at schools. And then we started also some works in characterization of the contaminated sites and developed the conceptual site model with a partner from the Netherlands. And also review of some options for mercury absorbents and also remediation plan. Next, please. So this is my last slide. Informations are available on this site and also on this site of mentioned also by Tim, and also on Nexus 3 website. So looking forward to have a question and answer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Union. That was a fantastic presentation and lots of really important information. And I want to remind everyone who's listening that if you have any questions about any of these presentations, please use the comments in the chat box, and we will get to those during the question and answer session at the end after the next two presentations. I would like to now transition and introduce Dr. Dwi Krisnayanti, who is the National Project Manager of the Gold ISMIA project with UNDP Indonesia. Dr. Krisnayanti was born not far from an ASGM site on Lombok Island in Indonesia. After graduating from Lincoln University in New Zealand, over the past decade, she has watched the ASGM activity increase, and as a result of an invisible environmental catastrophe in her backyard. She is pleased that the government of Indonesia is now taking significant actions to manage the mercury used in the ASGM sector, as we just heard Union talk about. And I would like to now hand it over to Dr. Krisnayanti. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the opportunity for providing special spotlight for Indonesia. For this opportunity, I would like to share planetGOLD Indonesia strategy to achieve the amount of reduction and elimination of mercury from ASGM sector in Indonesia. Next, please. When we are talking about the reduction eliminating mercury from ASGM sector, we are always coming to the question how we calculate it, how to estimate the amount, and in the end, how we can measure that the implementation of government regulation on reducing the amount of mercury released to the environment can be linked to this calculation and estimation. Next, please. It started with calculation how much actually mercury used by miners. From our 3 projects location, and we cross-checked with the national and international reference, we found that in average, each of trommel processed 10 kilogram of ore and feed by 250 gram mercury. This is equal to 25 kilogram feeding mercury per 1 ton of ore. Further calculating from the mercury to gold ratio measurement that 90% from the mercury feedings will be collected back by the miner to use. It means only 0.65% mercury is released to the environment. I believe some of you will be questioning this amount. Why it's very low compared to the common reference, which mentioned around 20% of mercury is released to the environment. but we do have the method and justification to the field result. Next, please. The concept of mercury avoidance by means reduction is used where the miners use non-mercury for processing the gold. In this term, we use cyanidation system, which commonly use whitewood and also by Indonesian miner. To convince this formula, we are testing and validating the calculation through collection of data directly from the miner on the field. We are using their statement that each offset average produce 1 gram of gold. We use this statement as the constant number. So for the example, from 130 sacks of ore, the miners get 120 gram gold. Means each sack produce around 1 gram. It's also from 80 sacks of ore, miner gets 70 gram of gold. Also, its sacks produce 1 gold. Even from 1,150 sacks, miners get around 1,000 gram of gold. This is equal to 1. So you can see this all from all the various number equal to 1. This is to prove that each offset is average produce 1 gram of gold. What we can conclude from this result that the largest portion of total mercury avoided lost to environment is expected from the existing mercury-free processing plants that are owned by the miners. This is to show that the miner have to role in mercury reduction effort. First one, miner as the main actor causing the mercury pollution. And the other one is miner as the frontier or hero in environmental protection through shifting to mercury-free technology. Indeed, the existing regulation from government for banning the use of mercury has encouraged the miner to take up the role as a hero for environmental protection. Next, please. Those formula and standard we apply to Jarimas or gold finger application. And from the application, so far we could claim by transferring technology to cyanidation system is able to reduce the use of mercury from 3 planetGOLD Indonesia project site in amount of 8 ton. The mobile application and web portal database can be monitored in systematic way and on regular basis. This mobile application will allow the project also to collect the site-specific data from the owner of processing units on daily basis. Meanwhile, the web portal database will assist the Indonesian government to estimate the total mercury avoided from specific site or region. Next slide, please. The next topic that I would like to share is about what the project experienced through process of shifting to mercury-free technology. Project conducting a capacity building to the miners cooperative, which one of the goal is giving the miners opportunity to analyze what the best system to recover the gold from their own site, from their own gold characterizations. Next, please. The alternative mercury-free technology whitewalls are available, but the important insight we receive from the miners that miner thinking by introducing one machine could cover all the gold type, all the gold size, and can be used in any site, while this is not working like this. This mindset is needed to be changed during introduction or campaign on technology. Next, please. Then what lesson learned we receive from this situation? The miner experience shall be taken into consideration in the designing process of mercury-free technology. How to follow up this? The miner shall will be informed on the project expected outcome and involved in the pre-design of designer detail engineering and also research and development session involving the miner upland prior the delivery or after the fabrication. Optimization of the machine are expected ahead of the establishment. This is, of course, for the project will be affecting during the budgeting. Female miner can be equally benefited from the technology intervention. We proved this when we introduced the prototype of individual small-scale cyanidation system. Next one is access to finance. will allow the miners to decide it, what the technology they want, what the capacity, how is the design. And because we also already proved also from our project the involvement of miner when they receive the access to finance. Formalize or legality the miner in mining cooperative will increase their responsible in technology shifting. This is indeed take much amount from the budgeting from the budget from the project. Well, formalize is quite often changing in the during formalize and regulation is quite often changing. It is important also to ensure the local government support in the establishment process of the technology. For example, how about the land provision? How about the permit? How about the asset handover next after the project finish? This is also will be affected during the budgeting. Next, please. We would like also to share our project sustainability, which is preparation of establishment Center of Excellence for ASGM. The aim of this center is to evolve artisanal miners into successful small-scale mining entrepreneurs. They aim to build and respect environment, social, health, and economic structure in their community. This concept previously have been initiated, and this is the right time to bring it back. The related minister is also have supported this concept. In addition, yes, we receive requests from the Ministry of Energy Mineral Resources. Also, we got support from other related ministry that to continue what the Planet Indonesia done so far to be implemented in others areas too. Next, please. I hope what the planetGOLD Indonesia do could enhance our knowledge and understanding on ASGM sector that can be adapted to another countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dewey. That was extremely informative and very very interesting to hear the developments. And I'm sure there's a lot of information in here for others to benefit from. And I want to remind everyone who's listening that if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the comment box to introduce them, and we will get back to them during the question and answer period at the end after this last presentation. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Sunbek Bang, who received a master's and a PhD from the Stevens Institute for Technology in New Jersey in the United States. Dr. Bang is currently the team leader for the Department of International Cooperation for KOMIR, or the Korean government agency responsible for mine rehabilitation and Mineral Resources Corporation, and is their deputy director. Dr. Bang is also a technical expert for the Committee of Grant Aid in the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dr. Bang has submitted a pre-recorded presentation, so now I would like to transition to that.
This is a great honor to have this opportunity to introduce my ongoing project in Indonesia. I'm Sunbek Bang from KOMIR. KOMIR is a Korean government agency under the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy. KOMIR is mainly focused on the mine reclamation and mine rehabilitation in mining area. Today I want to introduce my project, the title on remediation of mercury contamination in mining area of Indonesia. This is the contents of my presentation. First I want to introduce project overview, and then I will tell you the establishment of a mercury analytical laboratory and site investigation. And then I will tell you the field demonstration. I will show the concept, and then maybe we're gonna apply soon. And then finally I will explain the capacity building program. Objective of a project is a capacity building on effective and systematic management of mercury contamination. This project is started from the May 2020, and then will be finished in 2024. But the COVID-19 pandemic, so actually our project is started from last November, and then so maybe we need this 1 more year extension. So I hope we can finish in 2025. This is a budget. I will explain the budget is approximately is 4.6 US dollars, and then sponsored by Korean Institute for Advanced Technology, and then implemented by Community Consortium with the DGMC, Directorate General of Mineral and Coal. I show the work scope. The first one is establish of a Mercury analytical laboratory, including the procurement of equipment and training on operation of equipment. The second is a Mercury contaminant site investigation and assessment. I will conduct that one in Central Kalimantan and Western Nusa Tenggara. And then we're going to apply the field demonstration for mercury treatment in Kalimantan, Central Kalimantan. And finally, we're going to provide the capacity building program. So first one is development of a guideline on mercury management, and then operation of a mercury awareness program, and then invitational training program. Then finally, we're going to provide the local workshop. This is to show the flow chart of project. First step is establish of mercury analytical laboratory. We're going to provide the mercury analyzer, and then we're going to training the government official for operation, and then we're going to focus on the quality control. So this is very important because there is mercury is contaminated, in Indonesia, but we don't know how much is contaminated. So that reason we are first step is we are focused on the establish of mercury analytical laboratory. This is very important. After that we're gonna do the site investigation, first the planning, and then we want to do investigation and then assessment based on the result of site investigation. After that we know how much is contaminated, the site, and then we're gonna apply the a field demonstration work. We want to treat the mercury contaminated soil. So we are doing the designing for this equipment, and then this is a final treatment, and then we want to do the maintenance and operation with the monitoring. And then finally we want to provide the capacity building program, as I already mentioned, for development of the guideline, and then public awareness program, and the invitational training program, and local workshop. This is before the establishment of an analytical laboratory, we should provide the equipment. So we're going to provide the portable one. Top is a portable, and then bottom is a station analyzer. So this one is a Rumex mercury analyzer. So we can measure the mercury concentration in air, but when we attach this accessory, the G-Man is a mercury analyzer, we can analyze the total mercury in soil and in water. So that means we using the Rumex we measure the mercury in air and water and soil. We can measure everything. So we're going to provide the 3 is a mercury analyzer, portable one, and then another one is this is station mercury analyzer. So we're going to provide the methyl mercury analyzer, two methyl mercury analyzer, and then we're going to provide the 2 total mercury analyzer. One is automatic, one is a manual. So I think you can measure in Indonesia. I think very easy to measure the total. Mercury concentration, but very difficult to measure the methyl mercury in Indonesia. One of the reasons is that you don't have the like a methyl mercury analyzer. So that's the reason is we provide the other two is a methyl mercury analyzer. Also, same time is we're going to provide another equipment is like a rotary evaporator and then furnace, and then also drones and the field diometer and the pH meter, and then lab cabinet, row table, chair, and then other consumables. So we're going to provide it. And then so we're going to finally, we're going to make the state-of-the-art laboratory for mercury analysis. So that is our goal. And then we are doing the site investigation. Actually, we finished the preliminary survey for mercury contaminated area in Central Kalimantan the last November. We work with the DGMC at Tecumira. And also last February and March, so we finished the preliminary survey in Central Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and West Nusa Tenggara, and Sumatra, West Java, and Central Java. This one is to show the concept on the treatment of mercury contaminated soil. First, we collect the mercury contaminated soil. And then we using the separator, we separate the two groups. First group is the size, soil size is more than 50 milliliter. And then another group is soil size less than 50 milliliter. Because one of the reasons is if we treat the whole like mercury contaminated soil, and then this is not effective because usually the mercury is existence in like a very fine particle of soil. So that's the reason is we are separating, and then is we are focused on the less than is 50 milliliter of size of soil, and then is we put the soil into the mobile thermal treatment equipment, and then is we gonna treat the soil, and so we collect the treated soil, and then also we capture the mercury in exhaust gas. So this is one is we are making this is a device this year, and is the next year is we gonna operate this one in Indonesia. The last program is capacity building. As I already mentioned, that is development of a guideline on mercury contaminant management. This one is a result on the preliminary site investigation for mercury contaminated site in Central Kalimantan and Western Nusa Tenggara. So we collect all the results for the preliminary survey, and then is based on that is we're gonna develop the guideline, and then also is based on the guideline on mercury contaminated management, and then we want to operate the public awareness program on mercury contamination in Central Kalimantan. And then we're going to provide the training program on mercury contamination and management for Indonesian government official. So we bring the government official to Korea, and then we provide the training program. So we're going to provide it 2 times, and then we're going to provide the local workshop for Indonesian government official. So we already finished 2 workshop, and then 3 more workshops remain, and then maybe I hope that you can join this year. If you have more information, maybe you can contact me, and then we can communicate, and then we can, and if you have any question, maybe I can answer through the email. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I want to thank Dr. Bang for his excellent presentation, and we only have a very short period of time left in this session. So I want to direct one question that has come in to Yunyun, and that question is for Yunyun regarding the mercury storage. Can you comment on the relative costs of the 2 scenarios that you presented, please?
Yes, thank you for the question, Susan. Currently, we are still finalizing the calculation, but for the scenario 1, for the storage in Indonesia. For 1,000 tons of excess mercury stored, the cost is about $3 million for the capital investment, and for the operational cost is about 450,000 per year. So that's what I can say at the moment. That still needs to be calculated in more detail. And the second scenario will be a bit cheaper because it will include only the temporary storage in Indonesia, which is currently can be stored at the PPLI facility and then exported to other countries. So we are still finalizing it. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Union. And we've come to the end of our time, but I want to point out that there are a few questions in the chat that we will address later, and some of them are directed at Dr. Bang's presentation around other questions about cost. So we will get back to those as soon as possible. But for now, I would really like to thank, in particular, the Department of State for their support for this, U.S. Department of State, and I would like to thank Union and Dewey for your phenomenally good presentations, and we really appreciate all of the support you're providing to really try to reduce mercury as a threat in Indonesia.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
So with that, great. Thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who is joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to session Educating Miners Through Social Media and Other Technology Platform. My name is Małgorzata Stylo, and I work with United Nations Environment Program. For the past 5 years, I have been assisting governments developing their Minamata National Action Plan to reduce, where feasible, eliminate mercury use in artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Today, for the next approximately 50 minutes, miners, their communities, and their organization, as well as their access to knowledge and information, will be at the center of our attention and discussions. We are going to talk about education components, and as well as we'll go a little bit beyond and actually explore communication modalities and grassroots initiatives that enhance the information and experience exchange and connect miners and their communities. We'll hear 3 inspiring stories, including miner-led communication model to enhance experience exchange, SMS-based solution to facilitate communication and awareness raising, and an accessible training module for ASGM miners and other stakeholders, focusing on as well on the due diligence. At the end of our session, we will have time reserved for question and answers. So I encourage you to post your questions or comments in the Q&A section on your right hand on your screen. Okay, so it is my honor to kickstart today's discussion by introducing two guests. First, a miner herself, Blessing Hangwe from Zimbabwe. Blessing has been an ASGM miner and trader of gold in Zimbabwe since her youth and has also traded chrome and gemstone. She has held positions of responsibility in numerous ASM associations in Zimbabwe and in the region. Blessing Hangwe is the Delft Exchange Regional Knowledge Coordinator for English-speaking African region. And we are very pleased to have her today with us live. She is connecting from the field. So in case of any issues with the internet connection, we have also today with us Linda Lawson, who is supporting the team of knowledge exchange coordinators for the Delft Exchange initiatives. So Linda is a researcher at the Center for Social Responsibility in Mining at the University of Queensland. Her research interests include small-scale mining, supply chain for gemstones, and opportunities for gender equality. I would like to invite now Blessing to tell us her experience and her story. Blessing, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Blessing Hungwe, Knowledge Exchange Coordinator for English-speaking region of Africa. I'm a gold miner from Zimbabwe. I've been mining since childhood. And for the past 12 months, I've been the Delvi Exchange Knowledge Exchange Coordinator. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the Delvi Exchange Program. Delvi Exchange is a knowledge network which has been sponsored by World Bank, EGPS, with the University of Queensland in partnership with AWIMA, ACP, EU, UNDP, OECD, and with support from many regional partners. Next slide. Delvi Exchange is a knowledge exchange for miners by miners. It started in April 2021, which is 1 year old now. This is building a network and exchange culture. Next slide. The Delvi Exchange has connected 720 people from 65 countries in 48 plus forums, 6 open regional WhatsApp groups, and 1 global curated news group. Next slide. At the heart of our Delvi Exchange, there are knowledge exchange coordinators. That is myself. We've got Manuel, we've got Diane Agren, we've got Eureka Premas, we've got Ransan Gupta, and Ida Tembura. Next slide, please. What is special about Delvi Exchange is that it is created for miners, by miners, and places the miner's voice at the center of everything we do. We hold monthly regional forums, which have been a great way for us to connect and encourage each other and to learn from each other and local experts. It's great when the different regions visit each other's forums. For example, for us in Southern Africa, we've learned so much from West African groups, such as those in French-speaking countries. These forums are monthly and they're a key motor of the Delvi Exchange. We have held 48 plus forums this year. Next slide. The monthly forums are in English, Spanish, and French. They can be a meetup and sharing of ideas. More often, the knowledge exchange coordinator organizes for someone to speak or address the panel. They cover a wide and amazing variety of topics. The photo is an example. This photo, which is on the screen, it's an example of from a quarry in India in a forum earlier this year. Next slide. The next slide, okay. The French-speaking African group in one of their forums brought a local doctor, Sawadogo, who talked about the place of women in ASGM in Burkina Faso. And this next slide is the health of artisanal and small-scale miners. This is a forum from African English-speaking group. It looked at a topic that no one has dealt with much, the nutrition of miners. Next slide. This was one of our first forums for Latin America. This forum gave people the chance to look at ASM and discuss the opportunities it would give post-pandemic. Next slide. The best is when there's deep regional exchange, as can be seen here in the South Central Asia, Mongolia, and India, and in Latin America, when networks grown between Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and in the Caribbean with Suriname, Guyana, and Jamaica. So this is a conversation with Mongolian miners. Next slide, please. Participation is by registration, and the open groups are managed entirely by knowledge exchange coordinators. The devices we have used are Photo Fridays and stories, that is practice exchange stories, that is about learning and challenges. These are film voices, notes, or a text. These are then curated into one global group, global curated news group. Next slide. Then we have our WhatsApp groups where miners talk to miners through text, voice messages, and especially photos and videos. The knowledge exchange coordinators convene these and encourage participation through weekly challenge like Photo Fridays, when groups post a photo of their work they're doing. Next slide. In the WhatsApp groups, we share practice stories where members report on their own experience and practice. We do exchange stories where members report on what they have learned and the experience from the experience of others. Then challenge stories. What is one problem your mining community needs help with? Next slide. Here's an example of a practice story. This is women who mine pebbles in Zambia. This is an example of what a practice story is. Next slide. This is an example of an exchange story where gemstones are mined in Zambia and the cutting is also done in Zambia. Next slide. This is a shocking challenge story from Central South Asia group where trapped miners left to dig their own way after 60 hours. Next slide. Next slide.
I'm here in Northern Mashonaland West Province at a chrome site where women miners have been given a tribute to mine chrome by one of the biggest chrome smelting companies in the country, Afrochin. This is chrome all ready for loading, and as you can see in the background, the truck is loading the chrome. The woman there, the owner of the claim, is actually loading, helping the guys in selecting and loading the chrome. Challenges that we have is that of pricing. Basically, when you have finds like this, some of the agents, they don't even understand it and they don't want to buy it at a good price. Normally we are running battles to get a fair price for our chrome, and we also have issues because the women, there's not much profit margins, and this is manual. Our boys do not have protective clothing. They are working deep in pits down under. Some, yes, we still call it open cast, but basically they'll be going underneath. So they have a challenge for protective clothing, and nobody really trains these guys in safe mining methods.
Thank you. That is an example of a challenge story from Chichi, a chrome miner in northern Zimbabwe. But let me end my presentation by saying there is no better place for an artisanal small-scale miner to be. This Delvi Exchange is for us, by us, a highway for empowering artisanal and small-scale miners and quarry workers to drive the agenda on issues that affect us. Thank you very much.
Apologies. Thank you very much, Blessing, for this wonderful presentation and giving us example of a very powerful tool, the Delvi Exchange, and the various methods that you're using to really enhance the action-oriented communication among miners. Thank you very much. Now we are going to move to our second guests, and we are going to talk about SMS-based approach to monitor and prevent the mercury use in ASGM sector. I'd like to invite Alexandre Jallion, who is a researcher and GIS manager at IPIS with more than 7 years of experience in international relations, conflicts analysis, and peace building. As a researcher and GIS manager, he manages projects investigating the link between natural resources and armed conflict in Central Africa, working with both institutional partners and local civil society organizations. Alexandre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So I would like to present a project we have been running at IPIS. So IPIS is the International Peace Information Service. It's an independent research center that is based in Belgium and work on the link between natural resources and conflicts, development, and good governance. Next slide. So we have started a project with Ulula, which is a social enterprise based in Canada that foster transparency in global supply chains and is working with technology and SMS-based technology. So we launched the project Kufatilia in 2018. So Kufatilia, it's the project where everyone in the mining communities can report an incident by simply sending the keyword Kufatilia to a phone line in Eastern DRC. So everyone can report the keyword Kufatilia, and that will automatically trigger an SMS-based survey. So this project is to report incidents. IPIS is a research center, and as such, we try to get information from the ground. We have different ways of getting information from the ground. One way that we developed is to give the mining communities the possibility to report themselves the incidents. Since we launched the project, we have been more than 1,800 incidents have been reported through the platform. It's about 40, 50 incidents every month. Once the incidents are reported to the platform, they are visible to a network of civil society organizations. So for now, we have 20 civil society organizations that are working with us in a transparent, independent, and participative way. Next slide. So people can report an incident. Here we see screenshots from a phone. So it's either on Orange, Vodacom, Airtel, or WhatsApp that people can send the keyword. Currently, the system is available in North Kivu, South Kivu, Ituri, and Owele. And it's also available in French, English, Swahili, and Lingala. So when someone reports an incident, it's anonymous. It's anonymous and it's free if they use the WhatsApp number. Next slide. So through this incident reporting mechanism, we received different typology of incidents. But one typology of incident we receive regularly are environmental issues that are reported by the mining communities. So anyone in the mining community can report the incidents. So for that we support dissemination campaigns to disseminate about the phone numbers. So the incidents can be reported by a miner, by a civil society organization, or by someone in the village. So we had about 169 incidents concerning environmental issues. Out of those, 43 cases of use of mercury have been documented. So we also developed a platform that you can see on the right here, which is an interactive dashboard, which is open and public and available for everyone to look and to query the database of incidents that have been reported. So here on the screenshot, we see that it's we click on one incident and it's use of mercury and pollution linked to mercury use. Next slide. EPIS is a research center, so we conduct different research on mining, especially in Eastern DRC, but we also worked in other countries such as Tanzania, Central African Republic, or Zimbabwe. But in Eastern DRC, EPIS teams and partners have mapped and visited more than 3,000 mining sites. Out of those mining sites in Eastern DRC, there are many gold mining sites. And when we study the presence or the use of mercury, we notice that mercury was documented, so was seen and reported by our surveyors on 266 mining sites, which makes it a little bit like 13% of the mining sites. But we noticed that mercury is employed more in the big mining sites rather than in the small mining sites. So we could document that mercury was used on mining sites employing about 82,000 workers, which roughly makes 28-30% of the gold ISM workers in Eastern DRC. So this information is available on our website, and there is this interactive web map that you can explore. And there is on the web map, on the filters, there is an option to select the mining sites where mercury has been documented. Next slide. So when we launched this project, Kufatilia, with our partner Ulula, the idea was first to give a tool for the mining communities to report and to signal the use of mercury in a particular mining site. But when people interact with the platform and report incidents, their phone number is saved. It's anonymous, but it's saved. So that allows us to push back information to the communities. So we call that broadcast messages to raise awareness to different issues. And so by sending SMS to the people that interacted with the system, we, for example, we can raise awareness on the effects of mercury to all the people that interacted with the system. So here on the right side, you see two examples of SMS that were sent to this database of phone numbers. Once we have the phone numbers, we can also conduct mobile phone surveys. So we organize mobile phone surveys where the participation is free and anonymous. So people in the database of phone numbers will receive a call, and we ask different questions. So you can see on the far right the different an example of questions that were asked to the database of respondents. So one of the questions was, in the last months, have you seen mercury being used at the mining sites? And the result you can see here below, the answer was yes in 57% of the respondent. 56% of the respondent reported having seen mercury being used at the mining sites in the last months. Next. Thank you very much. So this is a short presentation of a very interesting project where we interact with the mining communities using SMS, which is a widely available technology in the mining in Eastern DRC. You can find more information about this project on our website, and also here there are links to two short videos that you can go and explore on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexandre, for this presentation and for showcasing to us a very impactful tool that can really gather real-life information from the field, and at the same also can be used to really raise awareness about some of the issues that ASGM is facing, for example, mercury use. Thank you. And I just wanted to also remind everybody that if you have a question to the presenters or comment, please do not hesitate to put it in the Q&A section on your right. And finally, we're going to talk going to hear about approachable training modules and knowledge platform for miners and other ASGM actors. And I would like to welcome Natalia Uribe Martinez, who is working at Alliance for Responsible Mining. Her work focuses on creation, governance, and maintenance of standards such as Fairmine and Craft. Natalia has vast experience working along the entire gold supply chain, from ASM miners to intermediate companies and standard setting organization. I also would like to just express my big thanks to Natalia to join us today. She's actually based in Colombia, so it's very early in the morning for her. So thank you for your commitment and motivation to join us. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thanks again for this amazing invitation to the panel educating miners and practitioners through the use of technological platforms. I'm representing the Alliance for Responsible Mining. We are an NGO born and headquartered in Colombia, dedicated to promoting and facilitating responsible artisanal and small-scale mining as a sustainable development opportunity. In the last 15 years, we have worked in over 25 countries, supporting miners on the ground, and we're also known as a standard setting organization dedicated to the artisanal and small-scale mining with the development of the Fairmine standard and the Craft Code. At the Alliance for Responsible Mining, we are highly combines that the knowledge of good practices and learning exchange experience are quite impactful for positively transforming the ASM sector. Next slide. Today, I want to present the online learning platform. It is a training center and aims to serve as a virtual space to learn about the themes related to the sector. To sustainability, to learn about sustainability elements for the artisanal and small-scale mining, risk management, and responsible practices. We aim with the platform to provide a space of learning for ASM good practices multipliers and train of trainers to offer them a fruitful learning experience. At the moment, we have 20 courses on Moodle. We are also eager to update and expand the content to offer our 15 years of experience on ASM, our multilingual team, and additionally, we are also offering flexibility to adapt the content that we already have to country-specific needs, audience, and languages. Next, the video, please. Here you can see how is the interface of the learning platform, where you find different courses as well. Next slide. The platform has the following courses. For instance, the Craft Code introductory course available in 3 languages, French, Spanish, and English. The Craft Code and planetGOLD criteria might be, for instance, a potential course to develop. We also have the European Union regulation and OECD due diligence guidance, courses about gender, human rights, Mercury, next slide, leadership, Fairmine certification, Fairmine for auditors, and so on. Basically, we invite other organizations to team up with us to enhance this platform by using it and also creating together new courses. The objective is to facilitate with allies and with partners this learning space to articulate a network of trainers who multiply the knowledge within the ASM community. Next. The platform origins dates from 2014, when a regional group of trainers from Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia learn about the Fair Mine certification. Then we have opened the course to other stakeholders such as Peruvian officers, fair mine auditors, and multipliers in different countries. For instance, now we have a highly committed group from Ecuador with governmental officers, UNDP team, University UTPL, Central Bank, Processing Plant, even research institutes, attending and completing and learning about the Fair Mine certification. We will also open next month a new enrollment process to take the EU and due diligence course to Honduras stakeholders as part of a regional dialogue about due diligence. Or examples in the past, for instance, in Colombia, we have like local actors of the municipalities and supply chain participants learning about the crowd code and how to implement it and taking into practices. Next slide. And the video. Yeah. I want to show you here in the interface of the crowd code introductory course. For many of you, you know that the planetGOLD criteria is a brand version of the crowd code. So for instance, this is an opportunity to learn about it, the craft using the platform, and we offer with under subscription or partnership with Alice this course, and we welcome the planetGOLD, let's say, community to be aware of this existence of these tools. And additionally, we are so eager to co-develop an in-depth course with practicalities regarding how to implement the planetGOLD criteria and combining, for instance, online in-person training with online and in-person training, because according to our experience, combining both elements of learning are quite impactful for the minors. Just for reference, this course takes 17 hours to complete. It has like interactive activities and is supported during the learning process by an experienced tutor. Next slide. Furthermore, for the ASN good practice multipliers or community, and as part of the open source spirit of the craft code and with the support of the EPRM project, we developed some public resources such as the craft guidance book. This is the module, the volume 4, craft booklet, videos, craft report template that are available for the ASN community. Next slide. The learning experience. We see that the learning experience is not enough. Just having, let's say, an online platform or this kind of resources, but it's complemented by resources such as publication and booklets designed for the minors, and also publication that serves for the implementers, NGOs, and policymakers. Next video. Okay. Here you can see on our website where we have a list of different publications, resources. There are some in Spanish, other in English, other in French, and many of them are designed for the ASN sector. And for the minors, because our booklets or also our publication. Finally, talking about digitalization, Artisanal is working also with Ulula and with the support of Conservation X Lab to offer accessible technology and broadcast measures through Kipu project. It's something similar that IP shared with us, but in the Peruvian and Amazon context. The messages are about, for example, gold prices, health and safety training, and mining best practice. And second, I also want to show and introduce the ASN Progress app. This is a web-based solution developed in their state infrastructure by Berger. This tool has the objective to manage data from the ASM sites to collect and process the information of the practices. This tool also standardizes reporting expectation against craft code and facilitate the craft and fair mine assessment. Communicate positive impact indicators in the ASM sector and empowers also the ASM stakeholder. We are developing this, we see as a professional and valuable tool for allies, implementers, buyers, and donors to monitor the positive transformation of the ASM sector in terms of legitimacy, environmental protection, human rights, social development, among others. Next slide. Thank you again for this invitation. And my last comment is that we also use the social media channels to constantly provide and being connected with miners and with the ASM community, providing constantly podcasts on the ground, publications, materials, blogs, and news. So you can also follow us in these social channels. And thanks again.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Thank you for providing, overview of this very rich materials and platform and tools available for miners and other ASGM stakeholders. So we can move now to our Q&A part of our session. We have some question lined up, and I think the first set of questions actually is asking from various sources about, how do we really make sure that we reach out to the miners? How do we engage miners and that they are aware of these tools that are available for them? So I think I will kind of give each of you the opportunity to comment a little bit on that question. I'll maybe first turn to Blessing. So we had actually a specific question, could you please maybe, Blessing, elaborate a little bit more how you recruit miners to join the Delphi exchange platform?
Thank you, Molgasata. From my experience, having started right at the bottom of being an artisanal miner from a small community, going to be a leader in a province in the national Southern Africa. It was quite an experience of setting up a WhatsApp group. Yes, I understand that many people, some of the miners are from right down at the rural areas, and some of them don't have connection, but most of the miners now have WhatsApp. So it's easier to communicate through WhatsApp. So I can say with our exchange, Delphi exchange, it was quite, we could communicate. We communicated through WhatsApp and it was easier. And also there was the importance of using leaders and influencers to mobilize others to join the WhatsApp group. And we also maintain the WhatsApp groups, motivate by the things that are being shared, the important information that is there. It motivates miners to continue joining up the WhatsApp groups.
Thank you very much, Blessing. I will turn with this very similar question to Alexandre now. So also was very similar question, how do you reach out to miners so, they actually know about the tool and how, how can you grow this network?
Indeed. It's a really good question, because if you don't know the phone numbers to which you have to send the keyword Kufatilia, you can't interact with the platform. So we have to organize dissemination campaigns. But Kufatilia, it's a network. So it's a network of 25 for now partner local civil society organizations that EPC is working with. So 25 local NGOs that are active in South Kivu, North Kivu, Ituri, Owele. They are active on the ground. They have people who are focal points usually in mining communities. And so through this network, we support dissemination activities That can be meetings or distribution of flyers or banners that are visible in the mining, let's say in the mining support village, and also radio spots that are organized by the partners, CSOs, all of that to disseminate the phone numbers and disseminate the idea behind is that the mining communities is responsible to report incidents back to the civil society organization, so that civil society organization can follow up and try to resolve the incidents, working with local authorities, etc.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. Yes, I also would like to turn to Natalia to kind of follow up with similar team question, kind of also given your experience, how can the various training modules online that you propose or other materials, how to ensure they can reach out also miner association communities. Some experience from your side would be very appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The best way to reach the miners is with the activities, the on-site activities, because yes, we know that there are challenges about connectivity, internet, and so on. However, we have seen like a trend that the miners are also like quite active using WhatsApp, Facebook, and this kind of social media, so that it's also useful and powerful to be engaged with them. So I can say that the best approach is to combine this online way to connect with the miners and also like at least the training, as I say, to mix online training, for instance, gathering the miners in the municipality library and to have like some space for learning, online learning experiences, and at the same time to offer in-person learning with the group. It's also, I say, powerful about learning to have like hard copies sometimes when the internet connection is not quite stable. So flyers, booklets, so with key message and not that like heavy message for researchers or for academics, also taking that into consideration. And using, I have seen that it's quite useful, these WhatsApp groups or broadcasting messages or also like Facebook and this social media that sometimes some of the miners can follow.
Thank you very much, Natalia. And I think you also introduced an important subject that obviously we're talking today mostly about the virtual tools and technology tools, mobile, SMS, WhatsApp, other online platform. But I think we cannot exchange all of our interaction. We're talking about the communication between miners, among miners, virtually. It is powerful tool. But there's sometimes, as also Alexandre was mentioning in his presentation, the online tools can be paired with really field visits. So I think it just comes to my additional question to Blessings. We have seen this very powerful virtual tool and exchange that you're doing through WhatsApp forums. Do you think, there maybe in the future there is a place, since also we are hopefully finishing the pandemic phase, maybe there is more chances for in-person meetings. Do you envision there would be some chances for also in-person exchange through Delphi initiative?
Yes. Oh yes, I think we are going on the next stage of the Delphi exchange. We're going on the next stage, and I think after the pandemic, it will be very good to go physical with the exchanges. There's so many things that are blend through the exchange program, and would want to go and see physically and learn and touch and see how we can do it. So yes, on the next phase, I think there's a wide range of activities that we could do and other things we could do on the Delphi exchange and learn.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Blessing. I think we had some extra question for Natalia about the maybe availability of different languages. I mean, you mentioned they are available in Spanish, French, right, in English. I think they were asking also about some other local languages, Bahasa. I guess it depends on the regions. So I don't know if it's also something that you are looking into in having more languages, the various materials.
Yes, we are happy to have the learning platform in other languages. That is, it's certainty. For instance, the craft code introductory course is available in English, French, and Spanish. As we have developed also the courses depending on the needs and opportunities. There are some in English or in Spanish, so we are like, as I say, eager to team up with allies or with stakeholders that are interested to the course, to co-develop the content, to also create tailor-made courses according to the region, according to the specific needs of the audience, and also the languages. So we have some, as I say, in different languages, but we are happy also to explore opportunities and also develop the courses according to the needs that are identified, because it's not the same to have a course, for example, for Colombian miners and maybe for the Burkina Faso miner, because we also need to create the environment, the conditions, the realities might be different. So that's why we are like quite flexible to team up with stakeholders or realities that are interested to be part of this learning platform.
Thank you very much, Natalia. And maybe we have still 6 minutes left, so I have one more question for Alexandre. So you're giving us example of of this tool that you're doing in East DRC. Do you also envision to replicate this, in other regions that you're working on, or just maybe a little bit if you have something to share with us?
Yes, thank you very much. We'll be happy to expand the project. We are currently looking at an expansion in Congo to the Katanga area, or to cobalt mining sites in maybe Lualaba. So we are looking at an expansion in Congo, because that's basically it's almost a no-cost extension in terms of the technology side. Of course, we need to invest in our networks of partners and dissemination activities there, and also on the follow-up of incidents, because what we didn't discuss here too much, because it was oriented to technology, but it's this is a platform to report incidents, and all the incidents are follow-up by civil society organizations that try to resolve, or at least discuss the incidents with local authorities, and try to give some solutions to the use of Mercury, but other incidents too. In terms of extension, we will have to set up the platform again in another country, so that's possible technically, but we need new phone numbers, local phone numbers, and we need maybe a project to support that. We had discussion in Tanzania to do something similar, in Uganda, for example, but it's possible to do it in different countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. And if I could maybe also ask to add actually to our discussion Linda, that is also together with Blessing. I think she wanted to share a few extra thoughts from the Delphi Exchange initiative. Please, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you so much, Natalia and Alexandra. Very, very interesting to hear about your work, and congratulations. I know how hard it is to get to this point. So congratulations, done a great job, and let's look forward to collaboration together. Blessing, thank you so much. She's just doing a wonderful job. We just love to hear from her. Our next phase is likely to be a capacity building. It will be a site-based capacity building, and we'll be looking at empowering miners some of the themes exactly, Natalia, and the things that you're working in, I really hope we'll be able to collaborate. We're not reinventing the wheel. We are a university. We work with other universities. What we bring, I think, is empowering miners, empowering local scholars. So, for example, we'll be working with universities in Africa that are doing work in this field. And again, everything we've learned this last year about putting miners at the center and just, shutting up and letting things work from the ground up, that's what we're going to be doing. And but I think that it is a challenging area. It's massive, and we only can be as strong as each other working together on this project. So thanks for having us, and I'm sure that Blessing will give you our details if you'd like to join our global newsletter. We've just made a video about our first year, which is all the voices of our knowledge exchange coordinators. We've got 20 or 30 practice stories up on our website on the sustainable. If you look Delve Exchange videos, you'll find them. We're going to do better, but we have got plenty to share and plenty to show you. And it's been a great joy to watch people film their own stories. We said, look, hold the camera horizontally, make sure you've got natural light, and I don't know, Blessing, but your last video was amazing. It was so beautiful. I think she must have got a new camera. Anyway, it was just been very encouraging to see what people can do, when you just give them half a chance. So thank you very much for organising this session, and thanks. We're also going to be speaking next week at the OECD, if you'd like to join us in a 1-hour session there, where we'll show our happy birthday video with everyone talking, and just some of our thoughts for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Linda, for your contribution and comments. I think, we are about the time to close our session. So I think that we addressed most of the questions that were actually asked in the chat. But if any question we did not get really to answer today, they will be collected and answered and shared on the planetGOLD website after the event. So we have heard truly inspiring stories and example of powerful tools, and learned about the models to really enhance the communication and share information among ASGM miners. I hope to really see the kind of amplification of such examples in the future, and that the sustainability of those networks and tools is going to be ensured. And thank you very much to all panelists, Blessing, Linda, Alexandre, and Natalia. Thank you very much for your presentation, your answers, provided examples. And I think here we came to an end of our session, but as well of the first segment of today's third day of the Global Forum. The second segment of the forum will reconvene in 2 hours. So there are still very exciting topics to be covered. For example, discussion on removing mercury from tailing, or sharing a case study from gender impact and assessment from South America, and discussion on ASGM impacts on forests and biodiversity. So I invite you to have a really nice break for the next 2 hours, but as well invite you to come back to the forum, to the second segment to further discussion on the topic. Thank you very much to everybody, for all the participants and the presenters. Have a nice break.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Pleasure.